Chapter 469. In the endless darkness of the world of darkness, the figure of the ancient demon sovereign had undergone a huge change, splitting into two, from a single heaven-old devil venerable to a gigantic shadow of the heaven-old devil venerable, as well as a humanoid-like figure that was constantly changing. Although the human figure was only a shadow, it was incomparably vivid. It engraved all the details that a normal human figure should have, without missing a single detail. The moment Luo Fan saw the shadow, he knew that it was the true body of the Zizai Demon Lord. That was because when he saw the light, he naturally felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. It was as if the light in front of him was his own shadow. It was also Hong Jun's shadow. It was also Luo Fu's shadow. It was also the shadow of all living beings he had seen. Other than the Zizai Demon Lord, he could not think of any other living being that could possess such a mysterious and profound transformation. So this is the reason why the Zizai Demon Lord possesses such a strange ability. No wonder. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. But very quickly, he shifted his attention to the powerful existence behind the Zizai Demon Lord. The appearance of the ancient demon sovereign was similar to the one Luo Fan had seen before. It could be said to be identical. However, the auras emitted by the two had undergone an earth-shattering change. Although the ancient demon sovereign looked like he was facing a supreme, great Tao, but if one took a closer look, they would feel that his entire body was extremely ordinary, as if he was just a powerless mortal. However, the current ancient demon sovereign gave off an even stronger feeling of facing a supreme, great Tao. Furthermore, his entire body was exuding an extraordinary aura. It was as if the undulation of his skin, the fluttering of his hair, the trembling of his skin, and the trembling of his hands and feet were all evolving into a supreme law that could develop thousands of peerless abilities. At this time, the ancient devil venerable was hovering above the head of the Zizai Demon Master. Although he was about the same size as the Zizai Demon Master, and was not as eye-catching as the Zizai Demon Master at first glance, as long as one looked carefully, one would realize that the ancient devil venerable was like a gigantic deity that shrouded the heaven and earth, comparable to a pillar that supported the heavens. It floated high in the sky, its might suppressing the entire world. Under its illumination, the Zizai Demon Master seemed as tiny as an ant. "I'm not me. Not me is me." The ancient devil sovereign's expression was indifferent as he raised his hand and said. As he did this, the Freedom Demon Master seemed to have gained enlightenment. His entire body was suddenly ignited with a pitch-black flame. This kind of flame did not seem to be hot at all. It was like the most ordinary of lights and shadows. It even made people want to touch this strange flame. However, Zizai Demon King, who was enveloped by the flames, was howling miserably. This kind of mournful howl had already lost the feeling that the Demon Master had when he spoke, as if he could penetrate the depths of one's heart. What was contained in it was only the fear and panic contained in his own heart. This kind of mournful howl was distributed normally. At the beginning, it became stronger and stronger, and more terrified. After reaching its peak, it began to gradually weaken, and so did the fear. In the end, when the Freedom Demon Master was burned by the black flames into a colorless and transparent image that resembled a small heart, the voice that came from within had completely disappeared. The entire heart was only emitting a natural, calm, and pure feeling. It looked like a supreme existence that had just been born and had just taken shape. So that's how it is. Luo Fan's expression finally changed when he saw this. What the ancient devil sovereign was doing was clearly using the black flames to completely refine the Freedom Demon Master. He had even raised all of the Freedom Demon Master's abilities, techniques, and abilities to the peak, turning them into the purest, strongest, and purest demon heart. This demon heart was even more supreme than the great Freedom Supreme Heaven and Earth Demon Heart that the Freedom Demon Master had cultivated with the help of the crystal. After refining the entire Freedom Demon Master into such a demon heart, The ancient devil lord casually waved his hand, and the demon heart turned into a ray of light that rushed into his body, replacing the position of his original heart. The moment the heart entered his body, the ancient devil sovereign's body suddenly felt a sense of reality that he did not have before. This feeling of reality came so suddenly, and it was so mysterious. Before this feeling of reality appeared, Luo Fan did not feel that this ancient devil sovereign was fake at all, and did not feel that this ancient devil sovereign's body was unreal at all. However, when this feeling of reality suddenly appeared, he truly felt that the current ancient devil sovereign was real, and only then did he truly have something to rely on. After the feeling of reality appeared, the heaven old devil sovereign turned his head and smiled at the direction Luo Fan was looking at. His eyes reflected Luo Fan's face, which had a slight change in expression. When Luo Fan saw the actions of the ancient devil sovereign, he knew that the reason he was able to see the changes in the ancient devil sovereign in the world of darkness was not because he was lucky, but because the ancient devil sovereign had done it on purpose. Understanding this, Luo Fan came to a sudden realization. All of the actions of the ancient devil sovereign were replayed in his mind. Bit by bit, even the slightest change was magnified and slowed down by hundreds of millions of times. As a result, everything appeared in his mind, as if he was once again there. Previously, when he saw it, he only felt that the movements of the ancient devil sovereign were so natural and mysterious. But now that he had slowed it down and observed it carefully, he realized that the movements of the ancient devil sovereign actually hid so many truths of the universe and the mysteries of the great Tao. Every movement of the ancient devil sovereign contained countless profound mysteries. With just a thought, Luo Fan could comprehend all kinds of divine ability techniques that were different from the rules and laws of the Great Wasteland world. Although these divine ability techniques were different from the rules and laws of the Great Wasteland world, they seemed to be in line with some deeper and more profound mysteries, allowing Luo Fan to possess all kinds of power that he originally needed to rely on other more complicated techniques. Many thanks to the Devil Sovereign for bestowing the technique. After clearly seeing the mysteries of the various movements that appeared in his mind, Luo Fan bowed and said. The ancient Devil Sovereign laughed and did not reply. With a shake of his body, the entire world of darkness condensed into a thread of light. With a slight sway, it disappeared into the void where there was no time and no space. Seeing the ancient Devil Sovereign leave, Luo Fan sighed. The actions of the ancient Devil Sovereign were obviously done for him to see. He knew very well what it was for, but he had no choice but to accept it. Chapter 470. Although the Great Freedom magic was created by the Great Freedom Heavenly Demon Lord using endless energy and relying on the supreme power of the Great Tao of the Great Desolate World, it was not taught by the ancient Devil Venerable. Originally, it should have nothing to do with the Heaven Ancient Devil Venerable, but this Great Freedom magic, to a certain extent, matched the Tao that the Heaven Ancient Devil Venerable cultivated, and thus, by borrowing the power of some incomparably mysterious and profound channel, it crossed 200 million. It allowed cultivators who had cultivated the Great Freedom magic to a certain extent to be able to communicate with him. And he responded to this communication out of a moment of curiosity, which caused the Great Freedom magic to be connected to him in a certain way. If it was only for beings at the level of Luo Fan, or even the even stronger Ancient Devil Venerable, this kind of hidden connection was nothing, and there was no need for the Ancient Devil Venerable to worry. But from a performance of the Ancient Devil Venerable towards the supreme existence of the Ninely Great World, the fear in his heart made him not dare to speak disrespectfully. From this, one could see how incredible the power of the supreme existence of the Ninely Great World was. To an existence with that kind of supreme power, the subtle and obscure connection between the Ancient Devil Venerable and the Great Freedom magic was as clear as looking at the lines on the palm, and there was no possibility of hiding it. The Ancient Devil Venerable's current divine ability was so vast that it had reached a level that even Luo Fan could not understand. To be able to cultivate such a divine ability, There was no need to mention how many fortuitous encounters, how many life and death risks, and how many great opportunities. With so many experiences and being able to cultivate such a divine ability, there was no doubt about his cautiousness. Even if this obscure connection did not necessarily endanger him, he was not willing to take that little bit of risk. Not to mention that the price of solving this little bit of danger was to impart some principles to a being that he somewhat admired. Luo Fan was intelligent, with a thought. Although he did not know what was going on, he had already seen through the true meaning of the ancient devil venerable. However, he had no choice but to do as the ancient devil venerable had predicted. This was because the threat of the great freedom magic to the great desolate world was simply too great. The great freedom heavenly demon lord could only say that as long as any living being in this world practiced the great freedom magic, it was highly possible for him to be reborn, no matter how many times he was killed. No matter how powerful Luo Fan's divine ability was. At least it was within the scope of Luo Fan's current understanding. If the vast freedom demon master was left alive, it would be equivalent to leaving behind a huge hidden danger for the untainted land. If this hidden danger were to erupt in the future, it would be another great calamity for the untainted land. Letting out a long sigh, Luo Fan steadied his emotions. The frustration of having to do as his opponent had completely vanished. Shaking his head, with a single thought, the body formed by the blood drop rebirth slowly disintegrated. All the power contained in the body turned into a faintly discernible existence, shrinking inward in an extremely mysterious and bizarre way. As this power shrank, the substance that made up his body also shrank. The entire process was incomparably complicated, abstruse, and bizarre. After an unknown period of time, Luo Fan's entire body had actually transformed into a pitch-black and shiny strand of hair, which seemed to contain infinite power and power. After the strand of hair appeared, it shook slightly and tore open the boundless, timeless, and spaceless void. It directly passed through an incomparably mysterious location into the untainted land and appeared in front of Luo Fan's main body, which was in a mysterious location in the endless starry sky. Luo Fan casually waved his hand, and the strand of hair retracted and stuck to his head again. It was as if it had never been broken. He had a complete understanding of everything that the body that had been reborn from a drop of blood had experienced through an incomparably mysterious and abstruse channel. Even though he was an enemy, he could not help but feel a sense of admiration for the ancient devil lord. It was not just because the power of his divine ability had reached an unimaginable level, but most importantly, it was because of his carefree aura. Although he had the intention to follow the departure of the ancient devil lord, it was just as he had expected. The ability of the ancient devil lord was unbelievable. The entire process of his departure was mysterious and unimaginable. Even though he had seen every process and every detail with his own eyes, he could not figure out how he had left or which direction he had gone. Even if he wanted to track him, he lacked the strength. The ninely great world is actually so powerful. It seems that after this great calamity, the peace of the primordial world will not be as long as I imagined. This thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. This thought made Luo Fan feel a little heavy, but at the same time, he felt a little excited. The heart of living beings was like this. They yearned for peace, but when it was truly peaceful, it was difficult to accept. The more powerful a living being was, the more it was like this. After such a heavy and excited feeling, Luo Fan suppressed this matter in the depths of his soul and turned his attention to the great tribulation of the world in front of him. At this moment, the primordial world was constantly changing. The embryonic forms of the world that were scattered throughout the primordial world were still continuously absorbing the endless essence energy of the world. They were continuously absorbing the essence energy into the embryonic form of the world, allowing the essence energy to continuously promote the evolution of the embryonic form of the world according to some inconceivable mystery. As the embryonic forms of the world evolved, the supreme great Tao hidden in the world continued to speed up. The faintly discernible tremors of the entire primordial world also became more and more intense and more obvious. Luo Fan deliberately threw himself into the embryonic form of the world, and the interior of the limitless palace was also undergoing the same drastic changes. The embryonic forms of the 2,999 minor kiliocosms were evolving at a speed that was almost at the same speed as the embryonic form of the outside world. The progress that would have taken hundreds of millions of years to cross was compressed into a distance that could be calculated in days. At the same time, the countless heavenly demons in the entire world also collapsed at an unimaginable speed, turning into endless flesh and blood that scattered in all directions. They then fused into the void, fused into the earth, and similarly used another method to promote the changes in the primordial world. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. The various abnormal developments in the primordial world had also accumulated to a certain strange limit. A strange limit that was about to undergo a huge change, which meant that the great tribulation of the primordial world was about to pass. Chapter 471. The number of otherworldly demons that had invaded the primitive world this time was extremely large. There were trillions of them. Luo Fan had used the mysterious power of the Yellow Springs network to pull their souls into the virtual world to fight against billions of demon-killing cultivators. Although the demon-killing cultivators had the home advantage and had an unimaginable understanding of the otherworldly demons' weaknesses due to their tens of thousands of years of training, they had countless methods to deal with them. However, the difference in numbers between the demon-killing cultivators and the otherworldly demons was too great. Therefore, even though they had so many advantages, it was almost impossible to clear all the otherworldly demons in the primordial world without dozens of years. Although the atmosphere of the entire primordial world had changed in the past 3 years, the otherworldly demons that existed in the primordial world were still densely packed. It would still take a long time to clear them out. At this moment, the Khanate gods who had not entered the virtual world and survived to guard the primordial world, they had long given up on exterminating the otherworldly demons. After all, the primordial world was too vast. Given their cultivation levels, which were at least at the perfected immortal realm after being strengthened by the Star Beast Jade Pendant, it would normally be impossible for them to cross the areas they were guarding to other areas without dozens of years. It was obvious that dozens of years were long enough for the demon-killing cultivators in the virtual world to wipe out all the otherworldly demons. Clearly, the gains did not make up for the losses. Therefore, the thousands of Khanate gods, with the help of the responsibility that Luo Fan had given them back then, they could teleport at will in their respective areas. After completely wiping out the otherworldly demons in their respective areas, they returned to their respective cultivation places and quietly absorbed the gains from the great tribulation of heaven and earth. The great tribulation of heaven and earth was a huge tribulation. However, if they survived it, they would also reap great rewards, be it for the world or for the Khanate gods. It was the same for all of them. These Khanate gods, they originally had a subtle and mysterious connection with the primordial world. They were naturally more sensitive to such changes. After surviving the Great Tribulation, they realized that their connection with the entire primordial world seemed to have become closer. It was as if they could feel that the supreme great Tao that could only be blurry, vague, and even unconfirmed had become unprecedentedly obvious and clear. Everything he had seen and experienced in the Great Tribulation seemed to be fermenting, gradually releasing a mellow aroma of wine, producing an intoxicating effect. With such a rare opportunity, how could there be any innate gods to waste it? Although the number of otherworldly demons was already extremely large and did not seem to have changed much compared to 3 years ago, it did not mean that the changes in the primordial world would be the same as the number of otherworldly demons. There were not many changes compared to 3 years ago. In fact, 3 years later, at this moment, the billions of embryonic forms of the primordial world that originally existed had evolved to the extreme. Compared to devouring hundreds of thousands of outer realm worlds, the number of otherworldly demons that were almost countless were insignificant. How could they lead to huge changes in the entire primordial world? After the embryonic form of the 1 billion square meters evolved to the extreme, it had already grown into a complete world of 1 billion square meters. These worlds were attached to the void of the primordial world. They were faintly discernible, and faintly discernible. They were like paintings that had fused with the void. They were abnormally mysterious and extremely profound. The relationship between these worlds and the primordial world was like the relationship between a bag attached to it and the clothes. They formed a separate but unified whole. The laws of the world were based on the primordial world. They had a deep and close connection with the primordial world. At the same time, they had a subtle and mysterious difference with the laws of the primordial world. However, the world itself was extremely complete. If it was separated, any world could exist independently. It could even give birth to all sorts of unbelievable living beings. It could create all sorts of innate gods similar to the primordial world. Such an existence, according to the essence of the 1 billion square meters, it was even more perfect than the outer realm of its predecessor. Of course, the 1 billion square meters was formed after the primordial world devoured hundreds of thousands of outer realm worlds. Although it relied on the unfathomable power of the supreme great Tao of the primordial world to produce such a mysterious and profound change. In the past 3 years, Luo Fan had wholeheartedly sensed the changes in the entire primordial world. The most important thing was how the world had evolved from an embryonic form to a complete world. As a result, every single detail of the evolution of the world over 1 billion square kilometers was absorbed into Luo Fan's mind without missing a single detail. Every single origin of space-time and the mysteries of the Great Path involved constantly impacted the way of space-time evolution that Luo Fan had comprehended since he started cultivating. This impact caused Luo Fan's gains in the past 3 years to be comparable to any other innate god in the primordial world. His gains were greater. Moreover, the difference between the two periods was like the difference between heaven and earth. The other innate gods? At most, he had comprehended a few mystical abilities and a few techniques. At most, he had seen the direction of the golden immortal realm. However, Luo Fan's gains allowed him to see the true true number. He felt that the shackles that prevented him from truly achieving the true number had been completely eliminated by him. It was as if he could really step over the realm in front of him at any time and step into the incredible realm of true number. Although the half-step true number and the true number seemed to be only one step apart, the difference between the two was even greater than the difference between a living being who had never cultivated and a living being who had attained the Dao fruit. According to Luo Fan's expectations, even if he had already achieved the half-step true number and broken through the biggest bottleneck, he would still need to spend a long time to accumulate wisdom, strength, and mystical abilities before he could remove the word half-step. Now that he had only spent 3 years, he was able to remove it in a short period of time. That was equivalent to shrinking his cultivation for an unknown period of time. Naturally, compared to any innate god, his gains were huge. To Luo Fan, who was under heavy pressure from the Jilly Great World, the progress in his cultivation made his mind relax to a certain extent. Compared to this, the changes that happened to the Void Wuji Palace, which had evolved with the embryonic form of 1 billion square worlds, seemed to have become secondary. After 3 years of evolution, the everlasting Void Palace's inner 2,999 embryonic minor kiliocosms had truly developed into 2,999 complete minor kiliocosms. It had also truly completed the 3,000 minor kiliocosms, allowing the everlasting Void Palace to finally reach the initial stage and become 10,000 times more perfect than before. Chapter 472. The 3,000 minor kiliocosms condensed into one, as if they were born naturally and flawlessly. The rules in natural great Tao of each minor kiliocosm were slightly weaker than those of other minor chiliocosms, but the difference could not be ignored at all. With all these differences, there was some kind of extremely mysterious and profound existence that was constantly circulating in the 3,000 minor chiliocosm. In the whole process of this circulation, every minor chiliocosm was undergoing some extremely weak changes. This weak change made all the minor chiliocosms undergo some incredible and mysterious growth, becoming more and more perfect and stable. Seeing that the evolution of the primordial world had reached a certain limit, an inexplicable enlightenment appeared in Luo Fan's mind. It's time. With a slight thought, the void Wuji palace turned into a yellow light and rushed out of the embryonic world. In an instant, it crossed hundreds of millions of miles and came to an extremely mysterious position in the endless starry sky. It directly appeared in front of Luo Fan. After the yellow light appeared in front of Luo Fan, it condensed and turned into the appearance of the void Wuji palace again. However, compared to the void Wuji palace he saw last time, the square palace in front of Luo Fan had undergone some changes. Its general appearance did not change, but it had a kind of aura that he did not have before. It was a perfect aura like the Great Tao. The void Wuji palace floated in front of Luo Fan and naturally resonated with the entire primordial world. It seemed to be some kind of world that was formed when the world was created. Luo Fan looked at the void Wuji palace that had undergone such a mysterious change. He thought of something and shouted softly, "Where's the boy?" With this shout, a sound like the morning bell and evening drum suddenly came from the void Wuji palace. Then, the void Wuji palace became blurry. After the blur, a man appeared in front of Luo Fan. The man's appearance and figure were exactly the same as the Wuji boy he met last time. However, there was an additional innate god aura around him. Although this innate aura was so weak that even someone as sharp as Luo Fan wouldn't be able to sense it, it was still fundamentally different from the past, allowing the essence of his life to be improved. After Wuji boy appeared, he bowed to Luo Fan and said, "Wuji thanks Master for your kindness." Luo Fan nodded and said, "There's no need to say more about this matter. Now that you have obtained the endless opportunities of the primordial world, I believe you can fuse with the primordial world and turn it into a real world, right?" "That's right," Limitless Child said. "Then let's begin." Luo Fan smiled and said. Wuji boy bowed. His body shook slightly, and he returned to the square palace. However, this time, the square palace was not the same as before. It was magnified millions of times like a huge mountain that was hundreds of thousands of zhang tall. When any object was magnified to a certain extent, it would become shocking and filled with a power that could shake one's soul. What's more, the void Wuji palace itself was extraordinary. It contained countless mini chiliocosms and medium chiliocosms. When it was magnified to millions of zhang tall, the shock even made Luo Fan feel that he had become small. Of course, this feeling was just an illusion to Luo Fan. The everlasting void palace was refined by him from the simplest material to its current level. All the changes within the treasure were incomparably clear to him. It was like looking at the lines on his palm. How could he feel small just because of the changes in the treasure? Seeing that the void Wuji palace had become like this, Luo Fan pointed casually. Boundless mysterious power gathered in the void. The supreme great Tao that was hidden in the darkness and could only be vaguely sensed by living beings with high cultivation seemed to have descended at this moment and enveloped the entire Wuji void palace, causing the entire Wuji void palace to faintly resonate with the miniature of the primordial world below, forming an extremely mysterious resonance. It was as if the two of them were gradually merging into one. Golden and silver light flowed slowly in Luo Fan's eyes. It seemed to hide the endless world, the endless universe, and the endless mysteries. Every change in the void Wuji palace was seen by him. Even the slightest movement of Yuan Qi could not escape his eyes. The ability to synchronize eyes and ears allowed him to receive information far beyond what he could see with his eyes. Therefore, even if the mysteries were hidden behind layers of barriers, Even the true eyes of sun and moon could not see them. They could not escape his senses. It was precisely because of this convenience that Luo Fan was able to control all the changes. The entire Void Wuji Palace trembled in sync with the primordial world. When the two vibrated at the same time and produced the strongest resonance, the aura emitted by the limitless Void Palace suddenly changed. In an instant, it felt as if it had disappeared in front of Luo Fan. If he closed his eyes, he would not even be able to sense its existence. As expected, Luo Fan smiled when he saw this. At this moment, the huge palace was still in front of him. It was still the same square palace and looked no different from before. The reason why he had the strange feeling of disappearing in front of him was because at this moment, the entire square palace had already merged with the primordial world. From a certain point of view, it had already become a part of the primordial world. The primordial world was vast and almost infinite. In such a vast world, the aura emitted from various locations was weak to the point that it was almost undetectable. However, the strength of the aura had reached a level that was beyond the imagination of all living beings. Such a terrifying and vast aura. No matter how profound a Dharma treasure was, it could not be compared to such a terrifying and vast aura. This difference in aura caused the Void Wuji Palace and the primordial world to merge into one to a certain extent. The aura on its body was completely covered by the aura of the primordial world. If it was not for a solar eclipse, it would be difficult to see the brilliant solar prominence above the sun. That was why after the Void Wuji Palace merged with the primordial world, its aura seemed to have completely disappeared and could no longer be detected. At this moment, the primordial world was undergoing a huge change. The moment the Void Wuji Palace left the embryonic form of the world that had been occupied by the Void Wuji Palace for 3 years lost all its shackles and finally underwent the same change as the other billions of embryonic forms of the world. In the blink of an eye, the embryonic form of the world bloomed like a flower bud and instantly extended. The embryonic form of the world was instantly destroyed. The earth, water, fire, and wind surged, yin and yang intertwined, and all living things were born. In the blink of an eye, an incomparably complete world that was even more complete, larger, and more stable than the other billions of worlds appeared. At the same time, it was even more mysterious. The supreme great Tao of the primordial world contained unimaginable mysteries. The embryonic form of the world was destined to evolve into a real world. In these 3 years, the endless primordial energy and all sorts of mysteries that the primordial world had injected into the embryonic form of the world were all absorbed by the Void Wuji Palace. Not a single trace could be used by the embryonic form of the world, preventing it from evolving into a real world. However, the embryonic form of the world still had to evolve into a real world. This was something that was destined by the supreme great Tao of the primordial world. Therefore, this caused the primordial world to inject all sorts of primordial energy and mysterious existences into the embryonic form of the world to increase. After the Void Wuji Palace left the embryonic form of the world, it was impossible for it to stop immediately. As a result, the moment the infinite Void Palace left the embryonic form of the world, the endless origin energy and the mysterious existence instantly pushed the embryonic form of the world to its limit. The process of it breaking through its shackles and evolving into a complete world, which would normally take 3 years like the other embryonic forms of the world, was compressed into an instant. Moreover, because of the large amount of primordial energy and mysterious existences, this world was more complete, more vast, and more stable than the other billions of worlds. The moment this world was formed, the embryonic form of the entire primordial world had completely evolved into a complete world. The number had reached 296 billion yuan, which was exactly the number of 10,000 yuan. However, it was in line with some inexplicable, mysterious principle. In the blink of an eye, the 296 billion square feet of worlds each spewed out an endless, mysterious aura. These mysterious auras were all different. Each aura had a slight but obvious difference from the auras that spewed out from the other worlds. At this moment, if the 296 billion yuan auras were combined together, they would form an extremely pure and invincible aura that was similar to the connate, inextinguishable spirit light. However, although the 296 billion yuan were all in the primordial world, they were distributed over an extremely wide area. Even the connate gods of the perfected immortal realm, without tens of thousands of years, it would be impossible to travel through all of them before the numerous auras could spread to the place where they came into contact with each other. They would naturally scatter into the endless primordial energy in the void. Naturally, it would be impossible for them to fuse and interweave together to form an aura similar to the connate, inextinguishable spirit light. Chapter 473. The 296 billion strands of aura released by the many worlds could not come into contact with each other, but they had already appeared in the primordial world after all. At that moment, the Wuji Palace in front of Luo Fan formed an extremely mysterious and profound connection with the entire primordial world. As a result, the moment the 296 billion strands of aura appeared, the Wuji Palace in front of Luo Fan naturally absorbed a strand of the aura released by each world. Through some mysterious and profound channel, it gathered them around itself and naturally formed a cloud, enveloping the entire Wuji Palace. Although each world only absorbed a strand of the aura, the 296 billion strands added together was enough to envelop the entire Wuji Palace tightly. When the aura came into contact with each other, it naturally began to undergo an extremely profound change under the effect of the supreme Great Tao. It produced an indescribable fusion. At the same time, as the aura fused, waves of aura seemed to seep out from within the Wuji Palace as well. They came into contact with the 296 billion strands of aura, as if they were exchanging something. The speed at which the aura fused was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, only 648 million strands were left. They were double the size of before, and at the same time, the indistinct, imperishable will that had existed before became slightly clearer. In the blink of an eye, the amount of aura decreased again. The imperishable will became even clearer. Just like that, it only took a few breaths. The aura formed by the 296 billion strands of aura that enveloped the Wuji Palace had already fused into a strand of aura the size of a strand of hair. This aura gave off an aura of eternal indestructibility. As it stood in the air, it was as if it had existed since the beginning of time, and it would continue to exist forever. Just sensing this aura, Luo Fan's mind flashed with countless spiritual lights, as if he had comprehended some kind of indestructible true intent. However, this was only an aura after all. Moreover, the will of indestructibility within this aura was extremely different from the truly indestructible connate spiritual aura. As a result, although Luo Fan could vaguely comprehend the true meaning of indestructibility from it, he only vaguely comprehended it. If he wanted to truly transform it into some kind of technique or state of Tao, he was still far from it. Although Luo Fan felt that he was unable to comprehend the true, imperishable realm from it, he didn't feel disappointed. With a point of his finger, the aura that gushed out from the limitless void palace instantly wrapped around the undying aura and pulled it into the limitless void palace. Within the limitless void palace, there was a dimensional realm and 3,000 complete minor kiliocosms. This had already formed a rather complete system, and it had truly completed the first level of the 3,000 worlds technique. Compared to the previous 2,999 worlds that were still in their embryonic form, it had undergone a tremendous change, and its sturdiness had increased by countless times. At this moment, the undying aura poured into the 3,000 minor kiliocosms, and the dimensional realm were like gears that had been activated. They began to operate in an incomparably mysterious and profound manner. Every minor kiliocosm emitted an aura that conformed with some inconceivable truth. together with the undying aura. It passed through the other minor kiliocosms and finally connected the 3,000 minor kiliocosms and the dimensional realm together. When the minor kiliocosms and the dimensional realm became one, they were also infected with a will of indestructibility from the undying aura. These 3,000 minor kiliocosms and dimensional realms were originally refined according to the 3,000 worlds technique. They were originally one, complementing each other, transforming each other, and supporting each other. But in the end, this was only the first level of this technique. There were still many gaps between the 3,000 minor kiliocosms and the dimensional realm, so they couldn't perfectly form a whole. But at this time, under the undying aura, these gaps finally disappeared. These 3,000 minor kiliocosms and the dimensional realm truly formed an inseparable whole. It was like a huge world composed of 3,000 minor kiliocosms and one-dimensional realm. In an instant, the entire limitless void palace disintegrated. The physical existence of the limitless void palace fused with the void. In the endless starry sky, an incomparably mysterious area was formed. It seemed to be infinitely large, but also the size of the palace itself. Inside this area, most of it was pitch black. Only near the center of the area were 3,001 bright spots. Each of them emitted a mysterious and unfathomable light that couldn't be described with words. These 3,001 lights were like 3,001 completely different lights. They complemented each other, but each contained a mysterious and unparalleled divine light. These stars were the 3,000 minor kiliocosms and one-dimensional realm. And this entire area was the scene that the limitless void palace had evolved into. The pitch-black area near the center of the star was the gap left for the countless minor kiliocosms, dimensional realms, and great kiliocosms. Although it looked pitch-black, it wasn't a void. In fact, there was a hidden ocean that contained infinite power, incomparably tyrannical, infinite destructive power, and infinite vitality, a sea of thunder. In the void, an aura seeped out of nowhere and entered the area formed by the limitless void palace, directly enveloping the entire area that the sea of lightning had enveloped. The sea of lightning surged, causing earthy yellow waves to appear out of nowhere in the void from time to time, before quickly surging into the endless void. These auras were attached to the already existing immortal aura, constantly strengthening it, making the immortal aura even more abundant in the area formed by the everlasting void palace. At the same time, an aura continuously seeped out of the 3,001 specks of light and directly seeped into the void. They passed through an extremely mysterious channel and entered an unknown place. It's finally done. Looking at this scene, Luo Fan lightly smiled. He raised his foot and stepped into the void, directly stepping into the area formed by the everlasting palace. When he crossed the boundary formed by the palace, it was as if he had crossed a space-time barrier and entered a completely different space-time. It was as if the surrounding time and space had suddenly undergone an earth-shattering change. He raised his eyes and looked around. Was there still a void around him? Around it was a boundless, surging sea of earth-yellow lightning that was constantly being stirred up by the undying aura that flowed in from the outside world. Chapter 474. The Sea of Lightning contained boundless power. Every surge of the sea seemed to contain enough power to shake the void and destroy the world. This sea of lightning was not empty. At the center of this sea of lightning, which was the location of the 3,001 star-like bright spots, there were 3,001 island-like existences standing there. The structure of the 3,001 islands was very mysterious. Among them, there were 3,000 islands that revolved around an even larger island like 3,000 indispensable fulcrums. The larger island that surpassed the other 3,000 islands was like the defense of the 3,000 islands. Although it was wrapped in the center of the 3,000 islands, it gave off a mysterious feeling as if it was wrapping around the 3,000 islands. The changes that occurred in the limitless void palace were all under Luo Fan's control. Naturally, He didn't have the slightest doubt about these changes. With a thought, he took a step forward and instantly traversed billions of kilometers. He arrived at the center of the boundless sea of lightning, outside the 3001 islands. When he got closer, Luo Fan could see the true appearance of the islands. These islands were naturally not real islands. In reality, each island was covered by a space-time barrier and isolated, mysterious existences. Inside these existences, perhaps there really was an island, perhaps it was just a cave abode, perhaps it was just an object, or even a boundless world. The appearance of the island was just a natural scene that was formed by the lightning ocean. It was like a huge iceberg. Even if it was not an island, if it floated on the sea, it would naturally look like an island. Above these 3001 islands was a strange hall that seemed to be boundless yet extremely narrow. This strange hall was the one that he had been in when he first entered the Infinite Void Palace. At this moment, the Infinite Void Palace had fused with the Primordial world. The strange hall seemed even more majestic and grand. At the same time, it gave off a natural aura, as if it had existed since ancient times and was a natural aura of the world. Luo Fan looked at the hall. With a thought, he was already in the hall. The palace seemed to be on the 3001st islands, but that was not the case. The relationship between the palace and the 3001st islands was similar to the relationship between the 3001st islands. There was no difference between up and down. Its location was determined by one's will. As the master of the entire Infinite Void Palace, Luo Fan only needed to think, and he could enter it. When Luo Fan arrived at the palace, he saw the limitless boy waiting in the palace. Wuji Boy has already fused with the primordial world and communicated with the 296 billion square meters of world that appeared in the primordial world. He can obtain endless vitality from them at any time to strengthen himself. Seeing Luo Fan arrive, Wuji Boy bowed and reported. Hearing this, Luo Fan was happy. He nodded and smiled. That's good. You can go now. The limitless boy bowed again, but did not speak. His body flickered and gradually disappeared without a trace. It was as if he had merged with the void, or merged with the hall, or merged with the boundless sea of lightning below. Luo Fan sensed the changes that had occurred in the entire limitless void palace, and in an instant, his mind and intent unfolded. In that instant, he grasped even the slightest change that occurred when the entire Infinite Void Palace fused with the primordial world. The Infinite Void Palace was originally a grotto heaven treasure. This treasure was extremely powerful. It was a mysterious treasure that Luo Fan had refined when he had just achieved Tao. It contained all of Luo Fan's comprehension of cultivation and all of his proof of the supreme Tao. With this characteristic, the potential of the Infinite Void Palace was naturally immeasurable. However, the Infinite Void Palace wasn't without any shackles or weaknesses. In fact, the shackles and weaknesses were extremely obvious. They were so obvious that any living being could discover them if they paid a little attention. The shackles and weaknesses were the materials used to refine the Infinite Void Palace. The Infinite Void Palace was originally a magic treasure that Luo Fan had casually grabbed from the primordial world and refined from a piece of earth essence. After continuous refinement, continuous growth, and the addition of various other materials, it was finally formed. That piece of earth essence was naturally difficult to obtain in the future. It was enough to drive any cultivator crazy and cause endless bloodshed. However, in the primordial world, as long as one paid a little attention, one could scissor a material that was thousands of times more precious. With such a material as the foundation, no matter how many materials were added to the Infinite Void Palace and how many times it had been refined, it would definitely be more or less insufficient. It would become a shackle for it to advance further. The only way to change this situation was to completely change the nature of the Infinite Void Palace. It would transform from a magic treasure that was originally formed based on materials to a magic treasure that existed based on the void and the world. That was why there was this change. After the transformation of the Wuji Void Palace into the untainted world, All the material that made up the Wuji Void Palace had been decomposed by the void and transformed into a faintly discernible space-time barrier. This kind of space-time barrier existed between reality and illusion. It had unfathomable power and could even isolate space-time. If it could be refined into a physical body and used as the body of the Wuji Void Palace, then all the shackles and weaknesses of the Wuji Void Palace due to the lack of materials would naturally disappear. At that level, the toughness and strength of the Infinite Void Palace would be hundreds of millions of times greater than before. If the void of the untainted world was added to it, which could not be broken by brute force, then the Wuji Palace could even become an indestructible treasure. To a certain extent, it was close to a primordial spiritual treasure and had the characteristics of a primordial spiritual treasure. Of course, at this moment, the Infinite Void Palace had just been integrated into the primordial world. It had only just been transformed into a space-time barrier. It was unknown how long it would take to truly refine the space-time barrier into a physical existence. Under such circumstances, he could no longer separate the limitless Void Palace from the primordial world. He could no longer bring the limitless Void Palace around like before. Therefore, if Luo Fan really wanted to refine it into an indestructible treasure and give it the indestructible characteristic, he still needed billions of years to refine it. Luo Fan was well aware of the situation of the Infinite Void Palace. At this moment, he was in the palace, but he did not pay attention to the changes in the Infinite Void Palace. Instead, he was concerned about the situation of the 296 billion square feet of new world that was connected to the Infinite Void Palace. The 296 billion square feet of new world was in the period when the world had just been created. The rules of each world and the characteristics of the evolution of each world were being displayed in an extremely violent and chaotic way. At this moment, it was the best time to comprehend the many worlds. Chapter 475. At this moment, this palace was like a hub that connected countless space-time. It seemed like one could reach countless different worlds through this place. Just by standing in this palace, Luo Fan didn't need to search to be able to feel every process and every change that was taking place in the 296 billion square meters of new heaven and earth. Even though Luo Fan was a half-step primordial unity true number and an innate god who had completely broken the barrier between the half-step primordial unity true number and the primordial unity true number, the evolution of a heaven and earth, and the level of energy involved in it. Even though Luo Fan was now a half-step primordial unity true number and an innate god who had completely broken the barrier between the half-step primordial unity true number and the primordial unity true number, it couldn't even compare to 1/10,000th of it. With 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth combined into one, the drifting energies that were released almost at every moment were more than enough to create a primordial cultivator. As Luo Fan paid attention to the evolution of the numerous worlds, his body naturally withstood the cleansing of a Yuan Qi in the process. This kind of cleansing could not directly advance his cultivation realm, nor could it allow him to directly step into the primordial unity that required painstaking cultivation. But such a huge amount of energy, such a vast amount of energy, the evolution of heaven and earth, was branded in Luo Fan's mind and like a brand. Then, through his mind, it interfered with his sea of consciousness, causing his sea of consciousness to gradually undergo some subtle changes. This subtle change was so mysterious and strange that it added a lot of innate aura to the sea of consciousness, which was originally very similar to the real world, as if it was naturally created and evolved into a real world. In fact, even the creatures that were originally condensed from Luo Fan's thoughts seemed to have gained a lot of autonomy, and were even more similar to real living beings. 296 billion. This was a huge number. In Luo Fan's previous world, the country's population was about the same, yet could be called the world's most populous country. Amongst these worlds, even if a single world was only able to slightly allow Luo Fan to feel faint gains, when combined together, his gains would arrive at an unbelievable level. Thus, The appearance of such a situation at this moment was extremely normal. Luo Fan sensed the changes in the sea of consciousness, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He gradually closed his eyes and emptied his mind, allowing the evolution process of the 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth to be branded in his mind more easily. Just as Luo Fan was carefully sensing the 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth, another drastic change occurred in the primordial world. Or rather, it was the result of all the changes that had occurred before, and it was finally showing itself. The endless otherworldly demons that billions of demon-killing cultivators had spent 3 years to kill, but had not killed many, instantly exploded, turning into endless blood mist and flesh that spread out. Even though the primordial world was so vast, the moment the endless otherworldly demons exploded and turned into blood mist and flesh, it still turned pale red. It was as if the entire world was enveloped by a faint red mist. At the center of the explosion of the many otherworldly demons, it was as if a huge hole had been torn open in the void. Endless red mist surged in from the hole outside the primordial world. The mist contained the endless mysteries of the outer realm. It had an indescribable replenishing effect on the primordial world. Even though the primordial world had obtained tens of thousands of outer realm worlds that were even more nourishing, the otherworldly demons were no longer of much use to it. However, the moment the otherworldly demons exploded into endless blood mist and flesh, the supreme great Tao hidden in the primordial world still moved strangely. The entire primordial world began to circulate, and through a mysterious and unimaginable method, it transformed the endless flesh and blood essence into the primordial world. In just a few breaths, the hundreds of millions of otherworldly demons had completely disappeared from the primordial world, as if they had never appeared before. On the primordial world, besides the traces that were left on the land that had been plundered by the heavenly devils, it was as if the heavenly devils had never appeared. At the same time, within the demon-killing domain in the virtual world, the many otherworldly demons that were fighting with the demon-killing cultivators let out shrill cries of pain, indignation, or realization. Then, they dissipated at the same time, turning into boundless soul power that merged with the entire demon-killing domain. The entire demon-killing domain shook violently. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, it stabilized. The billions of stars and planets that had been destroyed in countless battles were condensed again under the effect of some mysterious law. They were even larger and more dazzling than before. After several years of battle, the void that had been shattered into countless fragments and became extremely messy, with countless spatial cracks recovered in an instant. After recovering, the stability of the void continued to improve. After this change, it would no longer be possible for living beings to shatter the void in the past. After this transformation, even an innate god at the golden immortal realm would not be able to withstand it. They would probably be able to shake the void slightly and create some spatial cracks that were as thin as threads. The demon-killing cultivators in the demon-killing domain had the ability to resurrect at will. In the past few years of battle, it was naturally impossible for there to be any demon-killing cultivators who had died and left the battle. Of course, there were also demon-killing cultivators who had left the battle for various reasons. However, compared to the huge number of demon-killing cultivators, this was negligible. These demon-killing cultivators who were still in battle had been wholeheartedly focused on the battle. However, they suddenly realized that their opponents had instantly dissipated and disappeared without a trace. For a moment, almost 99% of the demon-killing cultivators could not react. They floated in the cosmic void in a daze, not knowing how to react. Only an extremely small portion, such as the Heavenly Sword Supremacy, could react in an instant. It was precisely because they could react in time that they obtained benefits that were many times greater than the other demon-killing cultivators. This demon-killing domain was a part of the virtual world. Moreover, it was an extremely important part. Almost all of the mysteries of the virtual world were compressed into a part of it. Although it was only the mysteries of the virtual world compressed into it, it was still virtual. However, that was only true for existences at the level of Luo-Fan. To these demon-killing cultivators who had billions of cultivation realms and could not compare to Luo-Fan, this virtual world was real. It contained the laws of the world, the rules of judgment, the movement of the stars, and the mysteries of the void. All of these contained countless principles that they could comprehend and improve their cultivation realms. Fighting in this demon-killing domain with such a quality, with Hong Jun and the others helping them fight and providing them with all sorts of conveniences, to these demon-killing cultivators, it was equivalent to using another method to demonstrate the principles of this virtual world to them and to help them comprehend it. At this moment, this huge increase in the demon-killing domain also magnified the originally obscure, subtle, and complicated principles of the virtual world that were hidden behind layers of mist. Chapter 476. The demon-killing cultivators who noticed the huge change in the demon-killing domain instantly gained a harvest that was more than what they had gained in the past tens of thousands of years. At that moment, almost every demon-killing cultivator who noticed the huge change in the demon-killing domain felt a surge of energy of different qualities and strengths surging from their bodies. All of them actually increased by at least one or more realms in their cultivation techniques. There were even some demon-killing cultivators who directly increased their cultivation realm by a whole realm. Some who had never attained Tao became itinerant immortals who had attained Tao, and some who went from itinerant immortals to perfected immortals. Of course, there were very few of them. While the perfected immortal realm demon-killing cultivators also gained great benefits, the span of the perfected immortal realm was many times greater than that of the itinerant immortal realm. Yet, there were no perfected immortal realm demon-killing cultivators who could comprehend and reach the golden immortal realm. As the cultivation realms of the demon-killing cultivators increased, the power in the entire demon-killing domain changed greatly. The time that the demon-killing domain changed was extremely short. In just an instant, it had completely calmed down. By the time the other demonic-killing realm cultivators reacted in time, the entire demonic-killing realm had already returned to its previous stable state. Moreover, it was much more stable than before. If they wanted to comprehend some principles that would be beneficial to their cultivation and cultivation realm, the difficulty would be several times greater than before the change. Sensing the changes in the surroundings and seeing the changes in the cultivation realms of the few demon-killing cultivators, these demon-killing cultivators naturally felt regretful. However, the demon-killing cultivators who were able to fight to the last moment in the demon-killing domain would definitely have reached an extremely high level by now, even if their mental fortitude was lacking. Thus, it was extremely rare for them to feel resentment or jealousy because of this completely different experience. Instead, many demon-killing cultivators felt their spirits improve due to the huge difference in strength. Their Tao Heart realm improved greatly because of this. It could be said that they had gained something else. Hong Jun, Luo Fu, and the others had done their best to maintain the normal operation of the entire demon-killing domain for the past 3 years. They were constantly busy and did not relax just because the overall situation had been decided. After all, there were trillions of otherworldly demons in the demon-killing domain. Among the trillions of extraterrestrial devils, there would naturally be some geniuses with extraordinary aptitudes. Although the entire demon-killing domain was perfect, it was only a domain after all. In the process of cooperating with so many demon-killing cultivators to kill demons, there would naturally be some traces that would be detected by these talented otherworldly demons. If Hong Jun, Luo Fu, and company had not checked and filled in the gaps in these 3 years, even if this demon-killing domain had not been broken through, there would definitely be a large number of otherworldly demons that would escape this demon-killing domain and enter the vast virtual world outside. At that time, the impact on the many living beings of the primordial world would be secondary. The most troublesome thing was that the many otherworldly demons might be hidden among the endless living beings of the primordial world. It would be difficult to find them, and they would become hidden dangers in the primordial world. At that moment, all the otherworldly demons were suddenly killed by a mysterious power. Hong Jun and the others could not help but relax. They were Luo Fan's subordinates. The various great Dao techniques that Luo Fan had imparted to them were all more mysterious than the principles revealed in the demon-killing domain. Therefore, although the demon-killing domain had undergone such a huge change and could allow so many demon-killing cultivators to break through, to them, it was only a way to verify what they had learned. They did not gain as much as they had imagined. The great calamity is over. Hong Jun was in the middle of the demon-killing domain. He opened his eyes, and his expression was a little strange. I didn't expect that the great calamity would be over just like that. At that moment, Luo Fu's figure slowly appeared beside Hong Jun. He looked a little relaxed, but also a little doubtful. So, second senior brother also feels this way. I thought that I was the only one who felt this way. At that moment, Lei Jiuxiao also appeared beside him. Following that, Guang Pu, Luo Chunyang, Gu Ling, Lin Tiannan, and the others appeared one after another. In a short while, the center of the entire demon-killing domain was gathered with Luo Fan subordinates. Second junior brother, sixth junior brother, you are very wrong to think that way. Hong Jun waited for everyone to arrive before speaking. Eldest senior brother, please speak, Luo Fu said hurriedly. The scope of this great calamity of heaven and earth is vast and dangerous. It is beyond the imagination of all living beings. We see that it is very easy for us to pass this calamity in just a few years. It seems very simple and not dangerous. However, how can we not see how much preparation Master has made behind this ease and how many backups he has set up? Everything that we have experienced is only the easiest part of this great calamity. We must not underestimate the dangers of the great calamity because we are relaxed. Hong Jun did not hide anything and said directly. Hearing Hong Jun's words, Luo Fu, Guang Pu, and the others' expressions changed slightly. The ease and doubt that they had felt previously had completely disappeared in an instant. They even broke out in cold sweat, which they had not seen for many years, or perhaps even never seen in the past. At this moment, with Hong Jun's reminder, they finally recalled what their master and their father had been thinking, saying, and doing for the past tens of thousands of years. They also recalled the existence of this virtual world, the existence of the many demon-killing cultivators, the hundreds of thousands of innate gods, the existence of the various mystical abilities that they and the others had cultivated. Weren't all of these preparations for the great calamity of heaven and earth in the past few years? Thinking that they had unknowingly magnified their actions and unknowingly increased their own importance, they could not help but break out in a cold sweat and feel ashamed. After this shame, their minds regained clarity. They bowed to Hong Jun and said, "Thank you, eldest senior brother, for your guidance." Seeing that everyone had recovered, Hong Jun smiled slightly and said, "This is a small matter. Just keep in your heart. Now, let's go and see Master to report." Yes. After that scene just now, everyone was even more convinced of Hong Jun's authority. They immediately agreed in unison. Hong Jun nodded. With a thought was transmitted through the connection of the entire virtual world. This thought instantly passed through an incomparably mysterious channel and crossed an unknown distance. It was transmitted to Luo Fan's mind and will in the mysterious location of the endless starry sky. It was sensed by Luo Fan. At that moment, Luo Fan was using the opportunity of the Void Wuji Palace and the primordial world to comprehend the mysteries of the One. 296 billion square meters of evolution of the world. Suddenly, he received this thought. With a thought, he knew what had happened. With a thought, he split a bit of his mind and directly condensed an incarnation in the virtual world through the Netherworld network, appearing in front of Hong Jun and the others. Chapter 477. When everyone saw Luo Fan, they naturally greeted each other and did not mention anything else. After the greeting, Everyone elected Hong Jun to report to Luo Fan what they had done and their various achievements over the years. Although Luo Fan had long known what they had done, he did not stop them from reporting. He only listened to Hong Jun with a smile and nodded from time to time. Some things were not about the result, but the process. After Hong Jun finished reporting, Luo Fan smiled and said, "You have all done well over the years. It's all thanks to your hard work that we can survive this great calamity. I'm very pleased." Hearing Luo Fan's praise, everyone, including Hong Jun, felt extremely happy. They felt that all the hard work over the years was worth it. At this time, Luo Fan had already surpassed the half-step Tai true number and was close to achieving the Tai true number. His every word, action, and thought naturally caused the surrounding void to evolve. Although his praise was only a few words, under the influence of the surrounding void, it made everyone feel that the entire world seemed to have undergone an inexplicable change, as if the entire world was praising them. In addition, Luo Fan was a supreme existence in their hearts, which was why there was such a huge reaction. Luo Fan waited for everyone to calm down before saying, "There will be someone else to deal with the aftermath of this virtual world. You guys come with me." With that, without waiting for everyone to react, he waved his hand, and everyone naturally left the virtual world. Their minds returned to their original bodies in the primordial world. Then, their original bodies were affected by an indescribably mysterious power and disappeared from the primordial world in an instant. The entire process was natural, just like all the natural changes in the primordial world and the evolution of all the laws of heaven and earth. There was no trace of divine power or artificial power at all. During the process, Hong Jun and the others did not feel anything strange at all. In fact, apart from Hong Jun, who could sense that his mind had returned to the original body of the primordial world, the others only felt that when Luo Fan waved his hand, they suddenly arrived at a completely unfamiliar place. They seemed to have never been here before, but they felt inexplicably familiar. Moreover, the body that was originally virtual in the virtual world suddenly became real, almost at the same time. In the endless starry sky of the primordial world, in an extremely mysterious and mysterious place, where the Void Wuji Palace had merged with the primordial world, several figures suddenly appeared in the void. They were Hong Jun and the others. This was an extremely basic power that Luo Fan had produced after the Void Wuji Palace merged with the primordial world. He had brought Hong Jun and the others, who were scattered throughout the primordial world, to this place. When the few of them stepped into the void and saw the incomparably mysterious scene before them, an indescribable shock suddenly resounded in everyone's minds. This place was extremely mysterious and mysterious. Although Luo Fan was able to be so calm and could even enter and exit so easily, he thought that this place was very ordinary. In fact, the mysteries contained in this place were not inferior to those of Buzhou Mountain. Buzhou Mountain was formed from Pangu's spine. The mysteries contained in it were related to Pangu. The mysteries contained within were the various mysteries of Pangu. At this position, as long as one lowered their head, they would be able to see the entire primordial world. That was equivalent to being able to see the entire primordial world as long as he lowered his head. He could find all the mysteries of the primordial world. That was equivalent to containing everything related to Pangu, the creation of the world, the mysteries of the natural structure of the world, and the traces of the supreme great Tao of the primordial world. In such a mystical place, if someone with amazing aptitude were to suddenly descend here and visualize it in his mind, he would definitely be able to comprehend all kinds of supreme techniques. It would even be more useful and mysterious than visualizing Mount Buzhou. The reason why Luo Fan could face this place so easily and see it as if it was an ordinary observation position was because he had an unimaginable understanding of the structure of the entire primordial world. He had a connate God that surpassed all the primordial world's primordial world. Naturally, he did not feel much when he went deep into the place. However, Hong Jun and the others were naturally different. At that moment, only the miniature of the primordial world was left in their minds. Hong Jun and the others were all people with astonishing aptitude. Of course, they knew how rare this opportunity was. At that moment, he used all his strength to engrave the miniature of the primordial world in the depths of his spirit and turned it into a memory imprint that he would never forget. After a long time, they finally regained their senses. They looked at each other and felt inexplicably happy and shocked. It's a pity that Pangu's primordial spirit has already been retracted by the supreme Great Tao. Otherwise, they would probably be able to comprehend the supreme cultivation technique with just a glance. Luo Fan, who was in the strange hall of the Limitless Void Palace, saw the reactions of Hong Jun and the others. He felt that it was a pity. Back then, with the help of Pangu's primordial spirit, Luo Fan was able to comprehend the fundamental technique that he was cultivating by visualizing Buzhou Mountain. Although there were all sorts of opportunities, it was enough to prove how helpful Pangu's primordial spirit was to such visualization. If Hong Jun and the others still had Pangu's primordial spirit in their bodies, they would be able to visualize the miniature of the entire primordial world. Even if they could not comprehend the fundamental technique that Luo Fan had comprehended, they would definitely be able to comprehend some techniques that were extremely suitable for their own cultivation. Of course, that thought only flashed through his mind. After all, that was already destined. There was no point in regretting it now. Luo Fan naturally could not waste too much effort on that. With a slight thought, a guiding force acted on Hong Jun and the others. The appearance of the guiding force made Hong Jun and the others know that it was the summons of their master, father, and grandfather. They did not resist and followed the guiding force across the layers of void, heading towards the strange hall of the Limitless Void Palace. After the Limitless Void Palace merged with the primordial world, it possessed all sorts of supreme power that it originally did not possess. Naturally, it possessed all sorts of mysterious defensive abilities. At that moment, although Hong Jun had already arrived at this mysterious place that seemed to be extremely close to the Limitless Void Palace, with the abilities of Hong Jun and the others, if they wanted to fly to this strange hall with their own strength, they would probably need to spend dozens of years. Moreover, there was also the possibility of the influence of the 3,000 minor realms and a dimensional realm. Therefore, Luo Fan could not ignore them. Under the guidance of the guiding force, Hong Jun and the others only felt that they had turned into streams of light. There seemed to be countless space-time flashing around them. As the light and shadow changed, it seemed that there were billions of worlds rushing towards them and then being thrown far away. In a trance, they arrived at an incomparably strange yet familiar hall. When they arrived, Hong Jun and the rest instantly came to a realization and understood where they were. Chapter 478. Hong Jun and the others had been brought to the Wuji Palace by Luo Fan to cultivate. Lei Jiuxiao, in particular, had spent most of his life there. Therefore, they were more familiar with the Wuji Palace than they were with the untainted world. Although only a small part of the strange palace appeared in front of them, the architectural style, the material of the floor, and the familiarity made them instantly understand that they had come to the Wuji Palace of the Void. However, although they were familiar with the strange palace in front of them, the moment they confirmed that they were inside the Wuji Palace, an endless amount of strange aura crashed towards them like a surging river. It made them feel as if they had fallen into a completely unfamiliar and unpredictable world. After the Wuji Palace merged with the untainted world, it naturally formed a mysterious connection with the One. 296 million square miles of worlds that were scattered across the untainted world. This caused the aura of the One, 296 million square miles, to naturally fill the Wuji Palace. At this moment, what Hong Jun and the others sensed was the mysterious aura that was emitted by the One. 296 million square miles of worlds. Sensing these auras, the others were fine. They only felt that it was mysterious and inexplicable. It was as if they could vaguely find some auras that corresponded to their own Tao. However, Hong Jun was instantly shocked and felt that he could not control himself. This seems to be the true meaning of indestructibility. This thought filled Hong Jun's mind, causing him to almost be unable to think clearly. Hong Jun's cultivation had already reached the golden immortal realm. His earthly immortal Tao fruit had also reached the perfection realm. His Tao heart had even reached the 8th realm of Tao heart, close to the perfection realm. With the support of these two, how could Luo Fu and the others compare to the strength of his perception? Almost at every moment, he was processing information that was thousands or even tens of thousands of times more than what Luo Fu and the others had. The moment he sensed these 296 billion auras that came from all over the world, they would naturally combine into billions of different combinations, and he would naturally be able to combine that indestructible aura. Of course, Hong Jun had not comprehended the indestructible true intent after all, so the indestructible aura seemed to be wrong in his mind. Although he knew that it contained the indestructible true intent, he was unable to deduce it out of thin air. Under the stimulation of this seemingly right feeling, Hong Jun was many times more anxious than Luo Fu and the others. Fortunately, he knew that this was his master's magic treasure, and it wasn't a place where he could act presumptuously. Thus, even though he was anxious in his heart, he was barely able to control himself and didn't do anything inappropriate. However, even so, his eyes still revealed an uncontrollable eagerness. At this moment, a greeting resounded in everyone's ears. "All of you come here quickly." The voice was calm and dignified. It was Luo Fan's voice. Although it was just a voice, and they couldn't even detect where the voice came from, an inexplicable feeling instantly appeared in everyone's mind, allowing them to instantly understand where the here that Luo Fan mentioned was. Immediately, everyone bowed and stepped forward, walking in a certain direction in the hall. The rules in the hall were mysterious and inexplicable. If they didn't know their destination and just wandered around, they probably wouldn't be able to walk through the strange hall even if they walked to the end of the world. However, if they knew where their destination was, they only needed to walk in any direction to reach their destination in a very short amount of time. At this moment, Hong Jun and the others were like that. After an unknown period of time, which seemed to be just a moment, but also like they had been trekking for hundreds of millions of years, they arrived at a platform. The platform floated above a boundless ocean. There was no path around the platform that connected to the outside world. It was as if there was only this platform in the entire world except for the ocean. No matter how Hong Jun and the others looked into the distance or how they deduced, they could not find the path they had taken. They could not find the strange hall in their memories. This was not the kind of secret technique in the secular world, because Hong Jun and the others clearly remembered every process of walking from the strange hall to the platform. He clearly knew every step he had taken, and knew every detail of how he had walked from the strange palace to where he was now. After being stunned for a long time, Hong Jun and the others finally regained their senses. They bowed to Luo Fan, who was standing calmly in the middle of the platform. However, they already understood that the secret technique that Luo Fan had used was not something that they could understand at the moment. They suppressed the shock and surprise in their hearts. Luo Fan did not look at them. With a wave of his hand, they naturally stood up. He said, "This place can reflect the scene of the newly born one. 296 billion square meters of the primordial world. It can also sense the aura of the various worlds. You could choose a few worlds to experience." Hong Jun and the others looked around and saw that the black waves were boundless. Within a radius of billions of miles, the sea was so calm that there were no waves at all. It was like a boundless mirror, reflecting the boundless dark void above. There were no other so-called scenes of the various worlds. However, Hong Jun and the others trusted Luo Fan to the extreme. Since Luo Fan said that there were scenes of 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth reflected in it, there was naturally such a scene. They did not see it. It was just that their method of viewing was wrong, or they were not determined enough. They had such thoughts. After Hong Jun and the others thanked Luo Fan, they sat down cross-legged on the sea outside the platform. They silently circulated their Dharma powers and activated their own senses. Various rays of light shot out from their eyes. They relied on their own understanding or the various mysterious supernatural powers that Luo Fan had imparted to try their best to understand and observe the scenes of the One. 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth that Luo Fan had mentioned, as well as the One. 296 billion auras. Luo Fan, who had separated a trace of his mind to observe the actions of Hong Jun and the others, smiled slightly when he saw their performance. He was relieved and focused all his attention on the One. 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. As for what kind of gains Hong Jun and the others could obtain, it could only depend on their efforts and opportunities. It was not something that Luo Fan could control at will. Hong Jun and the others gradually distinguished themselves in the process of such efforts. Hong Jun was far better than his peers. After sitting down cross-legged for a few hours, his body gradually emitted an inexplicable wave. It gradually attracted the strange aura that flowed through the platform through some mysterious channel. The scene in his eyes also changed mysteriously. The strange aura was the endless aura that he had sensed when he had just stepped into the Wuji Palace's strange hall in the void. Only the aura he sensed now was millions and millions of times denser than before, millions and millions of times clearer. Moreover, these auras were continuously converging and evolving that seemingly right, yet not quite imperishable aura that he could only vaguely sense before. The indestructible true meaning filled the world and spread out. In front of him, the sea that was originally only reflecting an infinite dark void was divided into many layers. Each layer was a wonder of a world. Each layer was a primitive scene that was developing from the beginning to the direction of perfection, revealing the most subtle mystery of the structure of the world. I see. It turns out that this place isn't a reflection of the boundless void, but a reflection of the One. 296 billion square miles of the world. The reason why it appears so dark is because the scenes of the One, 296 billion square miles of the world, are completely superimposed, covering each other. This thought flashed through Hong Jun's mind. After this thought, he instantly understood what his master had said before. With my ability, I'm afraid I can only divide the scenes of the world from thousands of square miles. If there are more, I won't be able to deal with them at all, and I won't be able to distinguish the boundaries. After secretly sighing, Hong Jun calmed himself down and tried hard to find a world that matched the Tao that he had comprehended in the One. 296 billion square miles of the world. Each of the One, 296 billion square miles of the world, was more or less different from the other worlds. That was why it could be said that a world that was compatible with the Tao that all living beings had comprehended could be found. There were simply too many worlds, and even if each world was only slightly different from the previous one, the accumulation of such changes would cause the original world to have a completely different set of rules from the final world. After just a few days, Hong Jun had picked out the worlds he needed. Although these worlds were only about 1,000 square miles, occupying a total of 296 billion square miles was only a small, insignificant amount. Hong Jun still decisively excluded all the other worlds from his range of vision and only locked onto these 1,000 square miles of the world. At the same time, he also excluded all the auras of the One, 296 billion square miles from his perception, except for the auras that corresponded to these 1,000 square miles of the world. Then he corresponded this aura with the heavens and the earth and imprinted it in his mind. Just like Luo Fan, he quietly bore the energy fluctuations produced by the evolution of the heavens and the earth, cleansing his own soul and comprehending the supreme principles revealed within when the One, 296 billion square miles of auras gathered together. They could give rise to an indestructible aura, which contained the supreme, indestructible, true meaning. How could Hong Jun not know this? However, he knew better than anyone else that if he wanted to succeed in one move and evolve the One, 296 billion square miles of auras into the indestructible aura, and directly comprehend the supreme indestructible true meaning from the indestructible aura, the final result would be that he would gain nothing. It might even affect his Tao heart and his cultivation realm, because the amount of information contained within was too great. His cultivation was not enough to support him processing so much information. Chapter 479. With this choice, Hong Jun's mind gradually entered a mysterious and indescribable state. He felt that he seemed to have some kind of inexplicable connection with the supreme great Tao that he could not find. The Tao that he had comprehended for tens of thousands of years was changing in a way that he could not find any traces of. His figure also gradually became mysterious, as if he had already fused with the void, causing others to involuntarily ignore him. It was as if he was only formed by the colors of the void, an illusory existence. After Hong Jun, Luo Fu, Guang Pu, Lei Jiuxiao, and the others gradually changed. They saw some clues from the boundless sea. Perhaps they could not separate the scenes of the world as clearly as Hong Jun could, and they could not distinguish the auras, but they more or less gained something. What they saw and sensed might be different from reality, but compared to their current cultivation realm and Tao heart realm, it was already an extremely rare opportunity. It was enough for them to obtain relatively huge benefits. Time passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, several years had passed in the strange palace of the Void Wuji Palace. After Hong Jun and the others were led away by Luo Fan, the spike in the virtual world instantly sensed the changes in the entire virtual world. In that instant, he had an epiphany. I have to take care of all the aftermath work in this virtual world. After this understanding, he could not help but feel a sense of loss. However, this sense of loss only remained in his mind for less than a moment. After all, there were many benefits for him to deal with the aftermath of this virtual world. At the very least, it could allow him to have a deeper understanding of how the entire virtual world worked. After a moment of loss, he moved his mind and arrived at the center of the demon-killing domain. Once he arrived here, an infinite amount of information surged out from the void and entered his mind and consciousness. In an instant, he had a complete grasp of the entire demon-killing domain. As for those demon-killing cultivators who were still in the demon-killing domain, those who were either trying to comprehend the mystic arts, those who were filled with regret, those who were in a daze, or those who were resting, Jiang, he immediately sensed them. Sensing the presence of so many demon-killing cultivators, Ji2's thoughts moved, and a thought spread throughout the entire demon-killing region. All the demon-killing cultivators within the demon-killing region could sense it at the same time. The great calamity this time has come to an end, and this devil destruction domain will be sealed from now on. Fellow Taoists, please leave swiftly and wait for the situation to change in the future before you can step foot into this domain again. This thought reverberated in the minds of many demon-killing cultivators. At once, those demon-killing cultivators who were immersed in their own thoughts were jolted awake. Unlike Hong Jun and the others, these demon-slaying cultivators did not think that the great tribulation of heaven and earth would be easy to pass. Instead, it was the most difficult, most tragic, most troublesome, most dangerous, and at the same time, the most painful war they had ever fought. Before this war, they had prepared for it for tens of thousands of years. In these tens of thousands of years, they had been fighting and killing almost all the time. There was not a single moment of leisure. They had completely suppressed the battle instincts hidden deep in their souls. Although the rewards were huge, the hardships involved were not to be mentioned. Although only a few years had passed since the Great Tribulation had begun, it had been much more difficult and painful than the tens of thousands of years before. This was because, unlike the tens of thousands of years before, what they had encountered in these few years were real extraterrestrial demons. They were real existences. Although their mystical abilities were not necessarily comparable to the many demonic beings they had encountered in the tens of thousands of years before, there were so many of them that it was enough to make one break down. What's more, they had all sorts of joint attack formations and joint attack techniques. The power they could unleash was much stronger than the virtual demonic beings they had encountered previously. Therefore, in these few years, almost every single one of these demon-killing cultivators had died at least 100 times. Some of them had even died tens of thousands of times. Although they could be reborn every time they died, the feeling of death was no different from real death. That feeling was enough to make an ordinary person's mind break down. If not for the fact that these demon-killing cultivators were not ordinary people, just the number of times they had died would have been enough to cripple them. So, it's really over. Sighs could be heard coming from everywhere. Amidst their melancholy, these demon-killing cultivators activated the mechanism of the demon-killing domain one after another. Their figures crossed the void and directly left the demon-killing domain, appearing on the platform outside the demon-killing domain. After these demon-killing cultivators left one after another, G2 sighed. With a slight thought, the void in the entire demon-killing domain began to ripple and slowly turn into nothingness. After a few minutes, the demon-killing domain that encompassed the entire galaxy gradually disappeared into the void. The place where the demon-killing domain had originally been had become a pitch-black void. The light, the countless stars, the countless planets, and the endless stardust had all disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never existed in this void. This was because G2 had directly used his control over the demon-killing domain to hide the entire demon-killing domain. No living creature could sense it anymore. At this moment, the demon-killing domain seemed to have disappeared, but in fact, it was still there. However, even if its location did not change, under the rules of the virtual world, no living creature could step into it. After doing all this, G2's thoughts spread out and carefully sensed the entire virtual world. He sensed the foundations of a virtual world that had merged with the Yellow Springs. This virtual world had gone through such a huge battle that affected the entire primordial world. Even though the virtual world had been set up by Luo Fan and was slightly mysterious, it could not possibly remain unscathed. Naturally, G2 had to take good care of it. As he sensed the entire virtual world and the Yellow Springs, G2's figure shuttled between the virtual world and the primordial world. His figure also traversed the infinite void of the virtual world and appeared in various places that had been affected by the battle. However, he no longer had the energy to care about the many demon-killing cultivators. After the billions of demon-killing cultivators arrived on the platform, they discovered that not long after, the demon-killing domain behind them gradually changed. In the end, it disappeared in front of their eyes, as if it had turned into nothingness. This change caused the many demon-killing cultivators' expressions to become rather complicated. Some of them could not bear to look back, some of them relaxed, and some of them let go of a heavy burden in their hearts. There was joy and even reluctance. After the demon-killing domain disappeared for a long time, the many demon-killing cultivators slowly returned to normal. When they returned to normal, the entire platform became lively. Countless information, thoughts, and words constantly flowed back and forth in the spiritual consciousness network. Almost instinctively, the many demon-killing cultivators automatically divided into tens of thousands of groups. They were separated according to the 3,000 great Daos, the 48,000 men, and some famous itinerant cultivators. Chapter 480. After fighting together all these years, many demon-killing cultivators felt a sense of belonging to their respective organizations. Even though the great calamity of heaven and earth had ended, and these demon-killing cultivators no longer needed to gather in one place to prepare for battle. The 3,000 great Tao, the 48,000 men, and the various itinerant cultivators had formed a loose organization that divided the entire platform into tens of thousands of parts. Moreover, because each organization's strength was different, their achievements and reputations in the battles over the years were different. The positions they occupied were also different. But these are just small details. There was no need to pay too much attention to them. When these demon-killing cultivators saw the people they were familiar with, they felt a sense of closeness and a sense of vicissitudes. Naturally, there was a commotion. After a few days, the fate of these organizations formed by many demon-killing cultivators finally changed after the war. Stronger organizations like the 3,000 Great Tao were more cohesive. Although many demon-killing cultivators left, they still managed to keep their organizations together. Organizations like the Sky Sword Sect did not even lose a single member. As for the 48,000 men, perhaps because they were weaker, the members of these organizations did not have a strong sense of belonging. However, only a few of these organizations managed to maintain their integrity. Most of the organizations had their members leave. Only a few demon-killing cultivators stayed because of old friendships. The loose organizations formed by many itinerant cultivators were different from the 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 men. Originally, when they participated in the Great Tribulation, these demon-killing cultivators gathered around the famous itinerant cultivators as the core. They formed a loose organization without strict rules and regulations. In battle, they only provided limited support. They did not cooperate as meticulously as the 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 other men. But now, after the Great Calamity had passed, these demon-killing cultivators did not need to fight anymore. Instead, these itinerant cultivators formed a tight group of men because of their shared ideals. They planned to combine their Taos and work together to create a cultivation method that combined the strengths of everyone's Taos and spread them to the primordial world. Although there were not many of these groups, there were still more than 100 of them. These groups had just been formed, but they naturally attracted many demon-killing cultivators to join them. Some of these demon-killing cultivators were not strong. Some did not cultivate their cultivation methods well. Some were people who sought Tao without men. Of course, most of them were postnatal life forms. They belonged to the small Kiliacosm in Luo Fan's Void Wuji Palace. But there were also innate gods. Men who were not satisfied with the techniques they had comprehended would join these men's sections. In comparison, almost all the members of the 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 other sects added up would only be about the same as the total number of people in these hundreds of sections. After dispersing, the demon-slaying cultivators who had found an organization and formed a male sect agreed on a time and place to meet in the primordial world according to the situation. Then, they dispersed their bodies and wills in the virtual world and returned to their bodies in the primordial world. In just a few days, almost all the demon-killing cultivators, who were the main fighting force of the Great Tribulation of heaven and earth, had disappeared from the virtual world. In the virtual world, apart from the demon-slaying cultivators, there were countless other living creatures. Therefore, the departure of the billions of demon-slaying cultivators did not make the virtual world desolate. It only made the virtual world less battle-hungry and the spiritual sense network less peaceful, which was rare. The untainted land creatures who spent all day and night in the virtual world were not used to it. In the untainted world, in a huge lake that Luo Fan had specially found for many people who had ascended from the spirit world, countless escape lights streaked across the sky, using all kinds of flying escape methods. Some of them were heading toward an island on the lake, some were heading outside the lake, and some were heading toward an unknown distance. These were naturally the demon-slaying cultivators who had been summoned by various sects and organizations. On an island near the edge of the lake, it was shrouded in clouds and mist. Innate Yuan Qi and chaotic Yuan Qi were intertwining, turning into a mysterious Qi that circled around the island, forming all kinds of inexplicable and incredible scenes. This island was vast, with a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers, and was about the same size as a continent. There were mountains, rivers, grasslands, hills, plains, deserts, plateaus, and valleys. Almost all kinds of terrain could be found on it. All kinds of ordinary, powerful, mysterious, and mediocre living creatures lived comfortably on this island. From time to time, escape lights rose from a certain part of the island and went to another part of the island or outside the island at an unimaginable speed. This island was called the Three Mother Island. It was the residence of Luo Fan's 3 female subordinates, Shizi Luan, Tian Yi, and Lu Xia. Big Sister, although we have taken a lead by establishing the 3 God sect, the other 103 male sects are not easy to deal with. Many of the itinerant cultivators' original techniques are already very profound. If we gather the techniques of many itinerant cultivators to create a new technique, it will be even more profound. I'm afraid that the techniques we teach will not be advantageous. In a huge hall in the center of the Three-Mother Island, Tian, who was sitting on a throne, frowned and said to Shizi Luan, who was sitting in the middle. In these years, because of the existence of the demon-killing area, they had more time to teach. Thus, their male sect had developed to a considerable scale. There were hundreds of thousands of disciples under them. Among them, there were 108 true disciples and more than 3,000 inner disciples. During this process, the three of them had also established their status and addressed each other as sisters. Among them, Shizi Luan was the steadiest and the most dignified. She was addressed as the big sister. Tian was slightly inferior and became the second sister. Lu Xia became the third sister. At this moment, the three of them were discussing countermeasures for the many itinerant cultivators that had formed so many organizations and so many male sections. After all, with so many organizations and so many male sects, they would definitely divide their teaching resources and hinder their teaching progress. They could not help but be concerned. Second sister, have you forgotten our main goal? Shizi Luan smiled and said. The three of them were all beautiful, and their bodies were filled with a profound aura of the Tao. They sat on their thrones and shone brightly, illuminating the entire hall. At this moment, when Shizi Luan smiled, the hall seemed to be filled with a strange fragrance. Second sister, our ultimate goal isn't to spread the Tao among these post-celestial beings, but to spread the Tao to the numerous newly born innate gods? That's right. Right now, the three-god sect is just a place for us to practice. So what if the teaching resources are divided? Lu Xia, who was on the other side, smiled and said. Shizi Luan smiled and nodded. Tian was suddenly enlightened by her sisters. She smiled and said, that's right. I didn't think that after being the man leader for so many years, I would almost forget my original goal. Shizi Luan smiled and said, however, we have to deal with this matter. After all, if these male sects suppress our three-god sect, those innate gods might also be snatched by them. It's also possible that they'll snatch it away. That's not good. Chapter 481. Big sister is right, but how should we deal with it? Tian regained her composure and said with a smile, this is easy. With the Tao that you and I have learned from teacher, we will definitely be much more profound than other itinerant cultivators. As long as we create a cultivation method that surpasses the other male sex, even if many postnatal living beings will be attracted to the other male sex, we will also be able to highlight the profundity of our cultivation methods. What about the Khanate gods? Their attractiveness might even increase, the Luan said with a smile. That's right. Lu Xia's eyes lit up. The appearance of so many male sects in the primordial world meant that there were hundreds more options for the Khanate and postnatal living beings to seek Tao than before. They would definitely share the resources that the three of them used to pass on their Tao. This was unavoidable. Even if the Luan's cultivation realm rose to Luo Fan's current realm, she would not be able to reverse the situation. Thus, they could only settle for the next best thing. They would compete with the 100 male sects so that their three-god sect could stand out. Even if the other male sects came to compete, they would definitely occupy most of the resources. After the three finished their discussion, they did not stay any longer. Immediately, an auspicious cloud rushed out from each of their heads. Among them, the auspicious cloud above the Luan's head was pure gold. It covered an area of 12,960 acres. Tian's auspicious cloud was gold. It covered an area of 9,999 acres. Lu Xia's auspicious cloud was light yellow. It covered an area of 8,888 acres. The three auspicious clouds were so vast, but the entire hall was even more mysterious. Even though the combined area of the three auspicious clouds seemed to be much larger than the hall, the entire hall still easily contained the three auspicious clouds. It even seemed rather spacious, with most of the space left. This was because the hall had been refined by the three of them. It had become a mysterious place that was similar to a residence. It possessed some of the mysteries of a residence. That was why it had the mysterious characteristic of being able to contain items that far exceeded its size. The three auspicious clouds were not formed by powers like primordial chi, true essence, or dharma power. Instead, they were formed by countless dust-like words, patterns, talismans, patterns, pictures, symbols, and other carriers that recorded information. If all kinds of information carriers in each cloud were spread out, it would be a magnificent masterpiece of tens of thousands of words, hundreds of thousands of words. These three auspicious clouds were condensed from the trio's lifetime cultivation. They were the manifestation of their comprehension towards the profundities of the Grand Tao and the supreme principles of the universe. After the three auspicious clouds appeared, the three of them closed their eyes. Their breathing became extremely calm, as if they had fallen into silence. Following their actions, the three auspicious clouds above their heads began to come into contact. At the same time that an extremely intense conflict occurred, they were also undergoing some sort of extremely subtle fusion. After an unknown period of time, the three auspicious clouds merged into one. This fused auspicious cloud emitted a dazzling golden light. It was pure and condensed, as if it was formed by the accumulation of a single, incomparably pure and mysterious existence. It surged endlessly above the heads of the three of them. As it trembled, it seemed to be brewing some kind of mysterious existence that surpassed the imagination of all living beings. Time flew by, and it was unknown how much time had passed. During the process of the three of them creating the method, although the hall was not sealed, an unfathomable will surged into the sky. The entire three-mother island could sense it. The 108 true disciples, 3,000 inner disciples, and hundreds of thousands of outer disciples naturally sensed the unusual profoundness of the hall. The true disciple status was higher than all the other disciples. Originally, they could request to meet the three of them at any time. However, under the unfathomable will that surged into the sky, they did not dare to take a step into the hall easily. They could only watch from a mountain far away from the hall in anticipation. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. During these 100 years, the primordial world was in turmoil. Of course, this turmoil was not due to bloodshed, but due to the disciples becoming disciples. This lake was the gathering place of almost all the postnatal living beings in the primordial world. As a result, it became the center of the turmoil. During these 100 years, the tens of thousands of barren islands in the lake had become extremely prosperous. Rays of spiritual light rose from these islands, announcing their existence to the entire world. These islands were the mountains set up by the 3,000 great Tao, the 48,000 sidemen, and most of the 108 men's sects in the lake. Of course, these mountains were only the branches of the great Tao, the sidemen, and the men's sections. They were not the root of these organizations. The existence of these mountains was naturally to recruit members, subordinates, and disciples from the many postnatal living beings in the lake. 100 years ago, when the 3,000 great Tao, the 48,000 sidemen, and the 108 men's sects decided to surpass the virtual world, many postnatal living beings had already used various methods to head towards the place where they had originally agreed to gather. However, those were only relatively stronger. They had the ability to travel long distances and had a firm will to walk in the primordial world. Compared to most of the other postnatal living beings, the primordial world was too vast. Although the gathering places of those organizations were all around Bujo Mountain, many Khanate gods and demon-killing cultivators were currently at the foot of Bujo Mountain. It was too far for them. Although the gathering places of those organizations were all around Bujo Mountain, many Khanate gods and demon-killing cultivators were all at the foot of Bujo Mountain. It was too far for them. If they had to rush over such a long distance with their own strength, it would probably take them tens of thousands of years to do so. Obviously, there were very few living beings who had the determination to spend tens of thousands of years rushing to the gathering place. Therefore, if those organizations did not think of a way, even if the many postnatal living beings wanted to join their organizations, they would not be able to rush over. It was precisely because of this consideration that almost all the organizations had unanimously found an island in the lake to set up, except for a few who would rather go without than have a shoddy quality. They felt that those who did not have the determination to join their organizations were not qualified to do so. It was not an easy task to create a universal cultivation method. Among the 108 men's sects, after spending 100 years, only a few men's sects had managed to create a cultivation method that was barely presentable. If they could not create a cultivation method that could be cultivated by many postnatal living beings, the gathering power of the men's sects would naturally not be too strong. Therefore, among the tens of thousands of islands, the ones with the strongest spiritual light were the organizations like the 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 Sidemen. Among the other men's sects, only a few men's sects could compare to a few other organizations in terms of spiritual light. However, that was obviously only temporary. Based on the essential difference between the cultivation of the male sex and the 3,000 Taos and the 48,000 Taos, one could guess that once the male sect created their respective sect-guarding cultivation techniques, the situation would definitely undergo earth-shattering changes. Chapter 482. On this day, countless sounds of wind and thunder suddenly rose into the sky from Three Mother Island, which was near the edge of the lake. The astral wind, lightning, and fire layer above 45,000 kilometers seemed to have been struck by an invisible force, and a huge hole with a radius of several million kilometers was broken. The 9 layers of astral wind, thunder, and fire, which had formed a complete and strict system, suddenly collapsed with a loud bang under the effect of a mysterious power that came from the dark. Then they reassembled. In the end, they turned into countless weapons that looked like sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, tridents, and so on. However, they contained endless killing intent and the primordial world's endless massacre intent. Every single one of these monstrous weapons was over 10,000 feet in length, and they were like divine weapons of giants. Just a single one of these weapons alone possessed a power that would shock any living being to the point of being unable to control themselves. With billions upon billions of these weapons linked together, the level of shock they would feel would increase by trillions upon trillions of times. Even innate gods, seeing this, they could not help but be shocked. The postnatal living beings who did not even have the ability to walk freely in the primordial world and could only join the various organizations and sects in the lake performed even worse. At the moment when billions of things were formed, almost every living being who sensed this scene was dumbfounded. Some were even so scared that they fell to the ground, unable to control themselves. These billions of objects took shape in the void, and in an instant, they were like a lake pouring down from the 9 heavens, crashing down toward the 3 motherly islands below. They were so fast that they seemed to teleport. Almost at the same time, they had already pounced on 3 Mother Island. They were about to drown 3 Mother Island, as if they were about to wipe 3 Mother Island from the primordial world. At this moment, a soft een came from 3 Mother Island. The een was very light, as if a living being was talking softly in its sleep. It was not much louder than breathing, but it spread across the entire lake. The billions of living beings on the lake immediately heard the een in their minds. They even felt that the een seemed to contain endless mysterious thoughts and endless cultivation methods. The moment the een was heard, the billions of things formed by the astral wind, lightning, and fire suddenly stopped. It was as if time had suddenly stopped, and everything was frozen in the void. It directly formed a huge pillar that connected 3 motherly island to the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer above 90,000 kilometers. The weapons that were at least 100,000 feet long seemed to have grown out of thin air. It was as if no power could shake them, and no power could move them at all. It was as if they had existed in that space since ancient times. An unknown amount of time passed. It seemed like only a millionth of an instant, but it also seemed like thousands of years had passed. The billions of things moved again and continued to descend from the sky at an unimaginable speed, smashing into the three motherly islands. However, this time, it was completely different from before. Previously, that blast seemed to have converted the power of the entire universe into a destructive force that wanted to wipe out the three motherly islands. At this moment, it seemed to be attracted by an indescribable force. It wanted to escape, but was unable to. Moreover, the result was different from what he had expected. However, there was no reaction from the Samu Island despite the billions of things crashing in. Even the grass, wood, and dust on it didn't move at all. It was as if the billions of things were from another world, a virtual existence, a shadow of nothingness. This process lasted for several hours. After several hours, the millions of miles of astral wind, thunder, and fire layer above 90,000 kilometers disappeared without a trace. The sky turned into an empty hole that was millions of miles in circumference, and one could see the endless starry sky above. When the smallest starlight could be clearly seen, a speck of chaotic light slowly lit up in the center of the three motherly islands. As soon as it appeared, the inexhaustible innate energy and chaotic energy of the entire three mother island began to crazily gather towards it, as if they were attracted by a black hole. In an instant, it formed an increasingly large whirlpool that wrapped around the center of the speck of chaotic light. The scene created by the rapid flow of innate energy and chaotic energy was extremely grand, but none of the living beings who were paying attention to this place paid attention to the grand scene created by the flow of energy. What they were paying attention to was the change caused by the speck of chaotic light. The feelings of the 108 true disciples, the 3,000 inner disciples, and the hundreds of thousands of outer disciples of the Three God sect were different from those of the living beings who were paying attention to this place. What they felt was tens of thousands of times stronger than that of the other living beings. The moment the speck of chaotic light appeared, all the disciples of the Three God sect felt as if some indescribable, mysterious existence in the depths of their hearts had suddenly woken up from their dreams. There seemed to be an indescribable desire, an indescribable emotion, and an unimaginable joy emerging from the depths of their souls. In an instant, almost every disciple of the Three God sect burst into tears. However, at this moment, not a single disciple of the Three God sect felt ashamed or surprised. They were all attracted by the speck of chaotic light in the center of the island. After this speck of chaotic light attracted endless innate energy and chaotic energy into it, it grew very slowly and with great difficulty. After an unknown period of time, the speck of light suddenly split into three. From a speck of primal light, it split into another speck of Hun primal light. However, it had three different colors, and each of them was leaning towards gold and silver. After the light was divided, the speed at which it absorbed the primal chaos chi and innate essence chi increased by 100 times. Not only was the yuan chi on the island attracted, but the endless yuan chi outside the island and all kinds of water essence were also crazily sucked into it. Above 90,000 miles, within the huge hole created by the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, there was an endless amount of starlight essence that transformed into a huge pillar of light that descended from the sky and entered the light. After an unknown period of time, in the darkness, there seemed to be three indistinct thunderclaps. That the boundless suction force emitted by the light instantly disappeared. The light pillar formed by the star essence chi was naturally cut off, and the huge whirlpool of essence chi was instantly wiped out. Three primordial worlds appeared at the center of three motherly islands, replacing the Hun chaotic radiance. Three realms in one breath. Heaven and earth replaced the Tao fruit. All laws are born from the heart, and this is the origin of the great Tao. A leisurely voice came from the three primordial worlds, resounding in the minds of countless living beings in the huge lake. Chapter 483. The reason why the three primordial worlds were referred to as primordial was that this was the only word that could describe them. The difference between the three worlds and the Hun chaos was that they barely formed land, mountains, and rivers. Seriously speaking, they were only an uneven Hun chaos. The reason why they were referred to as worlds was because they clearly contained time and space, and they were also giving off an aura that only heaven and earth could give off. After the three worlds appeared at the center of the island, it was as if they were suppressing all of the worlds in the universe. The island, as well as the space in a radius of tens of millions of kilometers around it, seemed to have been suppressed by an indescribable power. Even the flow of the world's origin energy and air were restricted, and it was as if the three worlds would be able to take control of everything at any time and cause the same changes to occur. The disciples of the three gods sect within this area felt as if they had returned to their mother's womb, and an extremely safe, warm, and intimate feeling filled their minds. The various powers that they had painstakingly cultivated within their bodies had become more than 10 times more lively than in the past. In the past, many of the places that couldn't be reached seemed to have been cultivated for countless years, and they were now able to be easily reached by the various powers. So it turns out that the three sect masters have created such a method in the past 100 years. Our three deities sect will finally have a method to protect the sect and achieve the Tao. The time for us to soar has finally arrived. This sigh was like a giant hand that tore through the fog in front of everyone's eyes. The disciples of the three gods sect, who were originally only feeling joyful and intimate, but were unable to tell where this joy and intimacy came from, were suddenly enlightened, and they finally understood what was going on. At the same time, many beings who weren't disciples of the three gods sect also instantly understood what the song from the center of the island meant. All of a sudden, countless praises, admiration, and astonishment rang out in the hearts of all of the beings present. The three worlds above the center of the island rippled slightly, revealing the mysterious and mellow aura to the world for a long time. After a few minutes, they trembled slightly and dispersed into three mysterious forces that sank down and returned to the main hall at the center of the island. As the three worlds dispersed into three forces, the mysterious force that had enveloped the island and the tens of millions of kilometers around it instantly disappeared. All of the world's origin energy and powers regained their autonomy, as if they were once again under the control of the supreme great Tao of the primordial world. However, the hearts of the disciples of the three gods sect that were filled with safety, warmth, and intimacy didn't completely disappear. Instead, they were still faintly present. It was as if they had a home to return to, and a place that they could return to after being busy. All of the true disciples of the three gods sect can come to the main hall to learn the three sect-defining techniques that we've created. At this moment, all of the beings on the island heard such a voice ringing in their ears. The voice was leisurely and calm, and the tone was gentle and pleasing to the ear. It didn't have any bewitching power, but it made people involuntarily remember it in the depths of their divine souls, and they would never be willing to forget it for the rest of their lives. The three gods sect had 108 true disciples, and each of them had the cultivation of crossing disaster realm. The strongest true disciple only needed the last bit of enlightenment to transcend the heavenly tribulation and attain the Tao. Hearing the voice, the 108 true disciples were indescribably delighted. Under the envious gazes of the many inner and outer disciples, they turned into rays of light and flew from all over the island, landing in the main hall at the center of the island. The three sect-defining cultivation techniques were actually created based on Tao Master Luo Fan's Tao Fruit Great Tao. The three sect masters of the three gods sect are indeed geniuses. It seems that the matter of joining the three gods sect can't be delayed any longer. On an island not far away, a man floating in the clouds was thinking deeply. Around this man, there are several male women who also have a pensive look on their faces. These people were one of the 48,000 men. The 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 men were organizations formed during the demon-killing war. Its function was to integrate the forces during the demon-killing war, so that the demon-killing cultivators could display stronger combat power and better destroy the demon-killing war. The reason why it could transcend the virtual world and become a real organization in the real world of the untainted land was that many demon-killing cultivators had formed a deep friendship during the demon-killing war and were unwilling to separate. It was precisely because of this that the 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 men were much weaker in restricting the members of the organization than during the demon-killing war. What's more, because they did not create many cultivation techniques like the men's sects to allow their members to achieve Tao, many demon-killing cultivators wanted to join some of the men's sects to obtain Tao attainment. Just like these women, there were many people in the huge lake who had the same idea. After the 108 true disciples of the three deities sect stepped into the teaching hall, they found that there were 3 stone steels at the center of the teaching hall that were 100,000 feet tall and as wide as a cliff. The method inheritance hall had clearly been refined. Although it was not as big as the hall that Zun Wan and the other 2 were in, it still had many mysteries. As a result, the 3 stone tablets, which were clearly many times larger than the hall, were strangely contained by the hall. Anyone who stepped into the method inheritance hall would feel a vast aura the moment they stepped in, and they would involuntarily feel a sense of respect. The 3 stone tablets were densely recorded with countless patterns. These words and patterns were extremely profound. Although they were all clearly recorded on the stone tablets, all the true disciples only felt that they were blurry when they looked at them. They knew that they could even recognize the strokes of the words, but they could not truly understand them. They could not even truly remember them in their souls. It was as if there was too much information contained within them, far beyond what they could accept. These 3 stone tablets record the cultivation principles of the 3 sections. Not only do they contain the fundamental cultivation methods that lead straight to the primordial world, but they also contain the 3,000 divine abilities and techniques that have been derived from them. If one's Tao heart isn't pure, they won't be able to bear the information contained in them. All of you can purify your Tao heart here and comprehend it well. Zun Wan's voice leisurely entered the ears of the 108 true disciples. When the true disciples heard this voice, they hurriedly bowed towards the void to express their gratitude. Then, they sat down cross-legged and began to purify their Tao hearts. They worked hard to comprehend the sect's cultivation techniques recorded on the stone tablets. These true disciples were able to stand out among hundreds of thousands of their peers and become true disciples. They were naturally people with peerless aptitudes and pure Tao hearts. Before long, there were disciples who had purified their Tao hearts to comprehend the requirements of the stone tablets. They broke through the mist and saw the techniques recorded on the stone tablets. Chapter 484. While these true disciples were gradually comprehending the techniques recorded on the 3 stone steels, a different scene was taking place in the great hall at the center of the 3 motherly island, which served as the residence of the 3 trio wands. Golden, silver, and white lights filled the entire great hall. 3 human silhouettes took the place of Ji Luan and the other 2. These 3 phantoms seemed to be illusory, but they constantly emitted an indescribable aura of reality. It was so much so that when people saw these 3 phantoms, they would instantly be able to visualize the figures of 3 beautiful women in their minds. The golden, silver, and white lights were constantly trembling and expanding, as if they were transmitting some kind of indescribable message, seeking something indescribably wonderful from some mysterious place. After a long time, the lights gradually faded. The 3 human silhouettes gradually returned to their true forms. They were Shunwan, Tian, Yi, and Lucia. However, compared to 100 years ago, their auras had undergone an earth-shattering change. 100 years ago, anyone who saw them would naturally recognize them as innate gods. Even if they were newly born innate gods, they would naturally be categorized as one. They wouldn't think that the 3 of them were the same as other innate gods. There was a huge difference, but now it was different. Now, anyone who stepped into the Great Hall and saw the 3 of them would feel as if they were facing 3 different worlds. It was as if the ones sitting above were not three living beings or three women, but three boundless supreme existences that contained boundless power, and each and every one of their actions contained boundless wondrous techniques. At this time, any innate god was so tiny in front of them. In front of them, they were so small and insignificant that it was impossible to compare them with the other innate gods. Equivalent. I finally feel how profound Teacher's realm is Shunwan, who sat in the center side. Exactly. We spent 100 years and borrowed the power of the formation, but we only managed to deduce the cultivation method before the itinerant immortal stage. Back then, Teacher only needed a thought to create a supreme cultivation method that allowed us to cultivate to the golden immortal stage. Tiani sighed as well. When Lucia heard this, she smiled and said, "Elder sisters, at the very least, we can already sense the profundity of our teacher. Isn't this a huge improvement for us?" Third sister is right. Back then, we only knew that Teacher was unfathomable, but we didn't know how profound he was. Now that we can feel a little of it, it is indeed something worth celebrating, Shunwan said with a smile. Although the three of them spoke in a normal tone and did not use any power, the moment they spoke, it naturally caused the Yuan Qi in the entire hall to fluctuate subtly. The light and shadow in the hall also changed, as if the entire world had inexplicably changed with the change of their words. To Shunwan, Tianyi, and Lucia, spending 100 years to deduce and create the sect cultivation method was an extremely huge and difficult challenge. It almost exhausted all the wisdom they had accumulated over the past hundreds of thousands of years. It made them feel fatigue and hardships that they had never felt since they were born. But at the same time, the process was extremely beneficial to the three of them. At this moment, Shunwan and the other two had firmly stepped into the perfected immortal stage. Among them, Shunwan had even reached the peak of the perfected immortal stage. She only needed one last opportunity to comprehend some abstruse technique to break through the perfected immortal stage and become a golden immortal. Tianyi and Lucia were slightly inferior to Shunwan, but they were definitely not ordinary itinerant immortal stage innate gods. They cannot be compared. Shunwan, Tianyi, and Lucia were not born in the same place. Instead, they only discovered each other after they were summoned to the space-time illusion. After tens of thousands of years, they formed a deep friendship. They even snatched away many innate gods. After that, they became sisters because they were in the same boat. Thus, even though their original cultivation methods were quite profound, they were not the same. Furthermore, they were not categorized into cultivation systems like the Tao Fruit Great Tao, the Essence Soul Great Tao, the Golden Core Great Tao, the Pattern Great Tao, and the Talisman Great Tao. Although Luo Fan had praised these three cultivation systems back then, it was obvious that they could not compare to the Tao Fruit Great Tao. Originally, they were very confident in their own cultivation methods. They did not think that their cultivation methods would be inferior to other cultivation methods. However, after they became Luo Fan's disciples, they were not taken in as disciples by Luo Fan because they did not cultivate the Tao Fruit Great Tao. They could only be in such an awkward position. From then on, they realized how huge the gap between their cultivation methods and the Tao Fruit Great Tao was. After that, they deeply felt the gap between them and Luo Fan's disciples. However, their foundations had already been established. Even if they knew how huge the gap between their cultivation methods and the Tao Fruit Great Tao was, they could not change their cultivation methods. They could only watch as they were filled with eternal regret. Under the influence of this regret, the three of them tried their best to combine their cultivation methods when they deduced and created the cultivation methods of their sections. They used everything they had to create a cultivation method that was similar to the Tao Fruit Great Tao. Perhaps it was because they were gifted by the heavens, or perhaps it was because they were lucky, or perhaps it was because they had great karmic luck, but after 100 years of hard work and practically exhausting all their wisdom, they finally created these three scriptures. They condensed boundless energy and communicated with the supreme grand Tao in the unseen world, forming a primitive heaven and earth that acted as the source of energy, life, and soul. Although this cultivation method could not compare to the Tao fruit Great Tao, it surpassed the primordial spirit Great Tao, golden core Great Tao, pattern Great Tao, and talisman Great Tao. It created another cultivation method that directly connected to the origin of the Great Tao. Moreover, because this cultivation method was created by combining the cultivation methods of the three of them, its origin was the cultivation method of the three of them. As a result, after the Great Tao of the world was created, the power in their bodies naturally transformed from the originally pure power that had lost its profoundness into the origin power needed by the Great Tao of the world. It directly changed their souls, bodies, and life origin to form the primordial world. The reason why the primordial world and origin power were different was because the three of them had originally cultivated different cultivation methods. As a result, the origin power after the transformation would be different. Of course, this difference was only in the direction of the power, and there was no difference in the fundamentals. Even if one cultivated it to the end, there would still be no difference. The three stone steels in the technique imparting hall recorded the cultivation methods of Shun Wan, Tian Yi, and Luxia. In the end, they cultivated three different primordial worlds, as well as the various divine abilities and dharma arts that came with these three different cultivation methods. However, since the Great Tao of the world was newly created, the stone tablets only recorded the itinerant immortal realm. Chapter 485. According to Luo Fan's Tao fruit, the itinerant immortal realm and the perfected immortal realm were just two levels of the same realm. They were both earth immortal Tao fruits, so the difference was not too great. However, in reality, the difference between the itinerant immortal realm and the perfected immortal realm had reached an indescribable level. Although the great Tao of heaven and earth could only be cultivated to the itinerant immortal realm, and the true disciples of the three deities sect were all at the crossing disaster realm, such a cultivation method was enough for the true disciples to cultivate for tens of thousands of years. Tens of thousands of years was not long, but it was not short either. At least, it was enough for the three of them to perfect the great Tao of heaven and earth to the perfected immortal realm. They might even be able to create the cultivation method of the golden immortal realm with some fortuitous encounters. Therefore, the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth meant that the three deities sect would be passed down forever. The foundation of the primordial world had been established. After the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth, many living beings in the primordial world seemed to have woken up from a dream. They finally found a path to the supreme great Tao amidst their confusion. For a time, countless rays of light came from all over the primordial world to Three Mother Island. Three Mother Island became extremely lively in the following 100 years. The number of disciples under the three deities sect skyrocketed. The number of disciples under the three deities sect increased by 10 times in the past 100 years. Although the number of true disciples only increased by 100, the aptitudes of these true disciples were rather shocking. There were even 3 innate gods among them. They were not postnatal living beings. From this, it could be seen how beneficial the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth was to the three deities sect. Now was the beginning of the primordial world. The evolution of the primordial chi was still in the process of evolving from chaotic primordial chi to connate primordial chi. Apart from a small portion of chaotic primordial chi, the entire world was filled with endless connate primordial chi that filled the world. There is no need to say much about chaotic primordial chi. It was tainted with the aura of chaos and contained infinite power. It could even evolve all kinds of power. It was a supreme source of primordial chi of high quality. Although connate primordial chi was formed from chaotic primordial chi, it was inferior to chaotic primordial chi in terms of quality. However, it was also an extremely mysterious type of yuan chi. All living beings in the primordial world regardless of whether they were connate or postnatal beings. As long as they breathed in the connate primordial chi, they would be able to replenish their bodies and souls at any time. In other words, as long as any living being could breathe this connate yuan chi, they would not have to worry about their lifespan ending. In other words, as long as the primordial world was filled with endless connate vitality, even the floating monsters that should have been born and died would be able to live for thousands of years. Their bodies and souls would never die. How could such a situation affect the innate gods that were naturally born in the primordial world? To them, it was common sense. However, in the eyes of the many post-celestial beings that had ascended from the small world, this was a great benefit. It was proof that this primordial world was a supreme, immortal realm. After all, there were only a few living beings who could see through the evolution of the primordial world's primordial chi. For most living beings, even the majority of innate gods, in other words, the primordial energy in the primordial world would not change. It was even more impossible for the boundless innate yuan chi to disappear. As long as they were not destroyed by external forces, they would live forever. However, he did not know that the connate essence energy in the primordial world would continue to evolve over time. In the end, it would completely change from connate to postnatal, and in the end, it would turn into postnatal essence energy that no longer had such a special ability. Only a very small number of innate gods, only a small number of people with extraordinary intelligence could comprehend this process and feel fear in their hearts. It was precisely because of this reason that even though there were countless connate and postnatal living beings in the primordial world that had stepped foot on the path of cultivation to seek the Tao, only a very small number of them did so for the sake of obtaining an immortal lifespan. Instead, they only wanted to obtain countless divine abilities and dharma arts. They wanted to possess great power, be able to change the heavens and the earth, be able to move mountains and drain oceans, and be able to live freely in this dangerous primordial world. It was the same for all the living beings who had entered the three-god sect. The reason why the great Tao of heaven and earth, created by the three deities sect, is sought after by many living beings, apart from the fundamental cultivation method that leads straight to the itinerant immortal realm. The most important thing is that each cultivation method comes with 3,000 sets of magical powers and incantations. There are many innate gods in the primordial world. These innate gods, almost every single one of them naturally comprehended their own unique cultivation method. Although most of them could obtain Luo Fan's guidance and perfect their own cultivation method, Luo Fan would not do everything. He would at most perfect their fundamental cultivation method. As for the matching divine abilities and dharma arts, they naturally had to rely on these innate gods. They perfected it themselves. As for the innate gods, everyone has their own merits. The divine abilities and dharma arts that they created naturally have their strengths and weaknesses. Some have more, some have fewer. It is impossible for them to form a perfect and complete system. Precisely because of this, in the past, in the primordial world, apart from the various divine abilities and dharma arts that Luo Fan had passed down, there was almost no complete divine abilities and dharma art system that could cover everything. Only when the three-god sect's great Tao of heaven and earth was created did this situation change. In the eyes of the three of them, the 3,000 divine abilities and dharma arts of the great Tao of heaven and earth could only unleash a small portion of the endless mysteries of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It could only be considered a preliminary creation. It cannot be said to cover everything, nor could it be said to be perfect. However, compared to other innate and acquired life forms, this was already something that no one had ever thought of before. It could be said to cover all aspects, and it was sufficient to broaden their horizons by 1,000 times. It was sufficient to increase the might they could display at the same cultivation level by 1,000 times. Precisely because of this, when the true disciples of the three-god sect left the teaching hall and displayed their strength for the first time, the three-god sect instantly suppressed the 108 men's sects created by the many itinerant cultivators of the primordial world, as well as the 3,000 great Taos and 48,000 other men. In just a short 100 years, They almost became the second holy land in the entire primordial world, apart from Bujo Mountain. This change caused great damage to the other men's sects and organizations, but it was also a great stimulus. Fortunately, the many living beings in the primordial world had not experienced enough danger in the human world. They were still considered simple. Therefore, although the achievements of the three gods sect had damaged and stimulated them, they did not have the thought of gathering together to erase the three gods sect. They only painstakingly swore to create an even more profound cultivation method that could compare to the great Tao of heaven and earth and snatch back the many disciples. For a time, the primordial world was enveloped in a thick aura of creation. After more than 200 years of evolution, the new changes in the primordial world after the great tribulation of heaven and earth gradually appeared in front of the countless living beings. Chapter 486. During the great tribulation of heaven and earth, through various mysterious methods, the primordial world absorbed the essence of countless otherworldly demons and enriched the supreme great Tao. Under the effect of the supreme great Tao that had been enriched, countless living beings that originally did not exist in the primordial world gradually appeared in the primordial world over the past 200 years. There was a three-legged, white-headed, human-faced Churu, a sheep-like, red-haired deaf, a red-haired leopard with 5 tails and horns, and so on. All kinds of strange life forms were born everywhere in the primordial world, and they formed tribes at an extremely fast speed, occupying more and more vast primordial world. Although the various living beings that were naturally born in the primordial world, they were not innate gods. The innate gods that were born in the primordial world, they were fundamentally different. Innate gods, they were favored by the primordial world. When they were born, they possessed a connate aura. Their souls and aptitudes were earth-shattering. They only needed a thought, a hint, and they could easily enter the Tao. They could comprehend all kinds of incredible mystical abilities and techniques and possess all kinds of unfathomable power. They were rare embryos in the world. On the other hand, the countless creatures that had been born in the past 200 years were just wild beasts. Although they were naturally born in the untainted world and possessed various instinctive abilities and divine sense, almost none of them were born with complete intelligence, nor did they have any innate aura. Most of them only had instincts left in their bodies, and they only knew how to survive in the untainted world. The birth of so many living beings caused the danger of the entire primordial world to increase by more than 100 times. Although it was still a short time, and it could not be seen, it could be predicted that from now on, the survival of the fittest in the primordial world would be more than 100 times stronger than before. If he could not cultivate powerful mystical abilities and only knew how to muddle along, thinking that his body and soul would not be damaged by the passage of time, he would one day die in the mouth of some strange beast. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years had passed. After the great tribulation of heaven and earth, the development trend of the primordial world had been carried forward in the 3,000 years. At that moment, the number of living beings in the primordial world had reached an indescribable level. The entire primordial world was filled with beasts. A vast and wild aura filled the world. The roars of the beasts reverberated throughout the world, other than the innate gods. The active areas were all occupied by those strange beasts. In just a short period of time, in the eyes of the many living beings in the primordial world, the power structure in the entire primordial world had been reversed. The innate God who originally occupied the main body of the primordial world, and the post-celestial beings who had ascended from small worlds became the vulnerable group. Of course, this didn't mean that during these 3,000 years, the innate God, the strength of the Hotian life forms did not improve. On the contrary, during these 3,000 years, the numerous innate gods, the overall strength of the Hotian life forms had increased by at least 10,000 times. 3,000 years ago, the three sisters of the three god sect had first combined their cultivation methods with the great Tao that Luo Fan had taught to create the great Tao of heaven and earth, allowing the three god sect to become the #1 sect in the primordial world. It allowed the Three Mother Island to become the second holy land in the primordial world, apart from Bujo Mountain. After that, many other sects and organizations received enlightenment. They mobilized all their wisdom and worked together to create one mysterious, perfect, and complete cultivation method after another. They could cultivate great mystical abilities and unfathomable power. These cultivation methods had different foundations. Some were deep, while others were shallow. In the end, their cultivation achievements varied. Among them, only a few could form a great Tao that was comparable to the great Tao of heaven and earth. However, the appearance of these various cultivation methods changed the original cultivation state of the entire primordial world. It made the cultivation methods of the entire primordial world become orderly. At the same time, it also became stronger. The three-god sect still stood at the peak of the cultivation world of the entire primordial world. Its fundamental cultivation method, the great Tao of heaven and earth, was unfathomable. It was many times more perfect than it was 3,000 years ago. Not only had the cultivation method of the perfected immortal realm been perfected, but the matching great Tao had also increased to 48,000. Of course, after 3,000 years, there were only 365 types of irreplaceable and indispensable great Tao. However, it was not too exaggerated. With the existence of such a great Tao, one could imagine the strength of the three-god sect. At this time, there were already 3,000 true disciples. Half of them had already broken through the limit of the heavenly lifespan realm and reached the itinerant immortal realm. Further down, there were tens of thousands of inner disciples and millions of outer disciples. However, these were not things that the three sisters were happy about. What made them the most happy was that 3,000 years ago, there were only a few Khanate gods among the true disciples. There were already hundreds of them. Khanate gods who taught the Tao. Khanate gods who had lost Panga's primordial spirit to be able to step onto the path of seeking the Tao and obtain the opportunity to achieve the Tao. They had already stabilized the great fortune they occupied. This was the final goal of the three sisters when they founded the three-god sect. This change meant that the development of the three-god sect was on the right path. How could they not be happy about this? Apart from the three-god sect, there were also 18 other sects that stood at the peak of the cultivation world. Due to the different nature of the cultivation methods, these 18 sects divided all the cultivation sects and organizations in the primordial world into 5 camps: Realm, Chi, God, Artifact, and Dharma. Realm was the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was the fusion of one's soul, body, and power into one place. In the end, it would open up a primitive, single-pole, multi-pole, or illusory world. Using it to achieve the Tao, one would finally obtain unimaginable power and seek the supreme great Tao. The representative was the three-god sect. Chi was the great Tao of true Chi. This great Tao was no less profound than the great Tao of heaven and earth. It looked at the boundless chaos, everything in the world, and all the worlds in the universe as manifestations of this aura. The goal of cultivation was to cultivate the Khanate origin true Chi in one's body, attach it to the soul, fuse with the laws, and change the rules. In the end, one had to use this Khanate origin true Chi to recreate the primordial world and reshape the world. There were 3 representatives: the Sky Mountain sect, the Myriad Chi sect, and the Hun Yuan men. Chapter 487. Gods are the great ways of gods. This kind of great way of cultivation was different from other kinds of primordial spirit great ways. It could even be said to be the complete opposite. The primordial spirit great way of cultivation strive to transcend the natural limitations of the human body. Through endless effort, one could finally cultivate into a Khanate Taoist body, and then use this Khanate Taoist body to seek the supreme great way. The cultivation method of the great path of gods, however, was created based on the body of an innate god. If Luo Fan had created an ordinary human to cultivate, he would have to rely on all kinds of mysterious methods to change and refine his body. In the end, he would abandon his original Khanate Taoist body and change his body into an existence similar to that of Khanate gods. In this way, he would obtain all kinds of supernatural powers and infinite strength of Khanate gods. If he could cultivate this method to the end, he could even break the world and live forever. Although it was different from the primordial spirit great way of cultivation, it was not much less mysterious than the great way of genuine Qi and the great way of heaven and earth. Moreover, because there were many sects of cultivation, there were many cultivation methods based on this great way. Some were even hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than the great way of heaven and earth and the great way of genuine Qi. This gave many living beings a variety of choices. It also made this great way of cultivation the most popular and most living beings in the untainted land. Khanate gods were naturally born in the untainted land. They were born with some kind of inexplicable connection with the untainted land. They were born with all kinds of incredible supernatural powers. However, these supernatural powers were innate and could only improve with the passage of time. Moreover, because they were rooted in the body instincts, ordinary Khanate gods could not perfectly control them. This great way of gods gathered the supreme wisdom of many Khanate gods. Although it imitated the body of Khanate gods, it developed all kinds of Khanate gods' supernatural powers and supernatural powers to the limit. With the supernatural powers and supernatural powers of Khanate gods as the foundation, it created countless derivative spells that could exert power far beyond the supernatural powers that Khanate gods could control instinctively. It was because of this development that the Great Way of gods could reach a level comparable to the Great Way of genuine Qi and the Great Way of heaven and earth. Among the top 18 peak sects, there were 10. They were the representatives of this Great Way of gods. Because they cultivated the Great Way of gods, they were also called divine sects. Among the remaining hundreds of sects, there were a total of 72 sects whose cultivation methods belonged to the Great Tao of the gods. Therefore, it could be said that the Great Tao of gods occupied the absolute mainstream in the primordial world. In comparison, the popularity of the other four camps was much inferior. Among the 5 major cultivation factions, the Tao of the sword, the Tao of the saber, the Tao of the spear, and so on. Among them, the one with the greatest achievements was the Heavenly Swordman, which was formerly known as the Heavenly Sword sect. This sect cultivated the Tao of the sword, and they could use the sword to cultivate supreme divine abilities. When cultivated to the peak, they could destroy billions of worlds with a single sword, break through the shackles of fate with a single sword, and finally achieve eternity. The cultivators of the artifact faction were the most complicated, and the differences between their cultivation methods were also the greatest. Some cultivators in this camp disdained other magic tools and weapons, such as a sword, a spear, or a saber, which were necessary for their own cultivation. They were even unwilling to share any of their energy with other things that were necessary for their cultivation, such as refining magic tools and alchemy. However, some of them were well-versed in all kinds of celestial artifacts and weapons. They wanted to try anything that was beneficial to cultivation, be it alchemy, refining weapons, martial arts cultivation methods, sabers, spears, swords, or halberds. They were not picky at all. As long as they found a chance, they would dabble in them. Apart from the 18 peak sects, there were also some sects that specialized in refining weapons and alchemy. They wanted to use these methods to obtain eternal life and earth-shattering divine abilities. It could be said that this faction was the most complicated and contradictory among the 5 major cultivation factions. Apart from the 4 major cultivation factions, the last cultivation faction was Dharma. The cultivators of this faction specialized in divine abilities and did not cultivate the body or the soul. They simply absorbed the foundation of a certain divine ability into their body and used all methods to strengthen it, allowing it to develop to its peak. In the end, they would cultivate it into a perfect, mysterious existence with its own consciousness. Then they would refine their own body and soul into it, replacing their own body and soul with this mysterious existence, turning it into a brand new self. If they could cultivate this method to its peak, they would be able to turn this mysterious existence into an existence similar to rules and laws. Because of this, they would obtain supreme power that could destroy the world. From then on, they would live as long as the world, shine as the sun and moon, and coexist with the universe. This faction was so extreme, but it was also because of this extremely short period of time that they could pour all their strength and wisdom into a divine ability or a spell. Compared to the other four factions, even the artifact faction swordsmanship was more focused and purer. As a result, the cultivation method of this faction was relatively easier to cultivate, and the speed of improvement was rather impressive. In addition, in the current situation where the primordial world was filled with endless connate essence chi, the cultivators of this camp had endless time to cultivate. They did not need to worry about the damage to their bodies and souls, but they would be able to cultivate it one day. As a result, this camp was also quite popular. There were many cultivators who joined it, and their numbers were even second to the great Tao of gods. Among the 18 peak male sects, other than the Three Gods sect, Hun Yuan Men, Heavenly Mountain sect, Myriad Chi sect, Heavenly Swordmen, and the 10 divine sects, the remaining 3 male sects belonged to this cultivation camp. Apart from the 18 peak male sects, there were also dozens of male sects that belonged to this cultivation camp. The 5 cultivation camps stood in the primordial world. They did not form a strict organization for men, but because their cultivation methods were similar, there were naturally many groups. After thousands of years of development, they naturally formed their own circles, allowing the 5 camps to truly take shape. As for other than the 5 camps, there were naturally many other cultivation methods. However, they were not mainstream. It was unknown when they would be lost, but there was no need to waste time. Over the past 3,000 years, because of the appearance of the 5 cultivation camps, the strength of the cultivators in the entire primordial world had increased by a lot. Although the cultivators were at a disadvantage because the number of beasts that were naturally produced in the primordial world after the great tribulation of heaven and earth was too large. Relatively speaking, the cultivators who had perfected their cultivation methods had a better understanding of the primordial world than 3,000 years ago. The range of activity was not limited to the surroundings of Buzhou Mountain and the huge lake. Instead, it covered almost every part of the primordial world. Even the boundless sea around had traces of many cultivators' activities. This was not difficult to understand. Although the primordial world was so vast that even ordinary innate gods could not cross it after flying for tens of thousands of years, Luo Fan had sent the 100,000 innate gods to various parts of the primordial world with the help of mysterious mystical abilities. After the great tribulation of heaven and earth, although the number of innate gods guarding various parts of the primordial world had decreased by a large amount, there were still many left. Through the connection of the virtual world with the various mysterious mystical abilities that had been created for thousands of years, and with the help of the innate gods in various parts of the primordial world, it was naturally not difficult for many cultivators to cross the geographical gap. Chapter 488. Translated by Hypersheep 325, edited by Mike. Here on this day, in the center of the untainted land, in an area known as the Linghai Province, 6 rays of light streaked across the sky and landed at the edge of a valley that was filled with liquid Kane vitality. Due to the expansion of the living being's range of activity, the situation where the entire untainted land was only divided by direction in the past would naturally not happen again. Naturally, there were many interested living beings who gave various names to the various regions. The division of the regions was even simpler. Back then, Luo Fan had divided the untainted land into 129,600 regions. That was already the most profound division, and it even conformed to some profound principles. What other division could compare to this method of division? As for the Linghai Province, it was one of the 129,600 regions that Luo Fan had divided up. Although the Linghai Province was only one of the 129,600 provinces in the untainted land, it was so vast that it had reached an unimaginable level. Any Khanate god would need to fly at full speed for hundreds or thousands of years to cross the distance. Although this valley was millions of miles wide, it was only a drop in the ocean compared to the entire Linghai province. However, the entire Linghai province was named after this valley. The Khanate vitality in the valley was condensed like a liquid. Because the valley was surrounded by mountains, it could not flow away, but it formed a boundless ocean. In this ocean lived 4 types of strange beasts. They were the Kuei ox, the hidden infant, the barking wu, and the black locust. It was also because of the existence of these 4 types of strange beasts that the valley became famous in the untainted land. The Spirit Sea in the valley directly named the entire province. These 4 types of strange beasts occupied more than half of the 8 Khanate thunder beasts in the untainted land. Apart from these 4 types of Khanate thunder beasts, the remaining 4 types of Khanate thunder beasts were not too far from here. They were only in a boundless forest about 3 billion miles away. They were the striking wood, the fate lotus, the neon leaf, and the sequoia. These 8 Khanate thunder beasts each naturally controlled a type of special thunder. In terms of power, although it was quite impressive, it was seriously considered nothing. However, for cultivation gods, for cultivators of the great Tao, these 8 Khanate thunder beasts had a completely different meaning. God? The great Tao was about changing one's body, changing one's original body into an extremely powerful one that possessed all sorts of innate abilities and abilities. When it was first formed, the only reference point was the innate God. But following God, the development of Tao was only based on a single innate God. If he were to cultivate, his final achievement would definitely be comparable to the innate gods. Under the same conditions, under the same perfect use of the innate divine ability, innate supernatural ability, and under the same condition of the same level of cultivation. Thus, the intelligent cultivators were unwilling to give up and started to think of ways to create something that could surpass the innate gods. His own cultivation method came out. In the end, they cast their gazes towards the countless mutated beasts that had appeared at an unimaginable speed in the primordial world over the past 3,000 years. It was under such circumstances that the 8 Khanate lightning beasts caught their attention. The 8 Khanate lightning beasts happened to be flowers, grass, trees, insects, fish, birds, and beasts. These 8 categories could cover all living beings in the world. In addition, they had the same kind of innate abilities. This caused a subtle and mysterious connection between the 8 Khanate lightning beasts. It was precisely because of the subtle and mysterious connection between the 8 Khanate lightning beasts that some experts of the divine sect combined the 8 Khanate lightning beasts. The cultivation method of the great Tao had almost surpassed all the gods. The cultivation method of the great Tao was the Son of Lightning. Although the Son of Lightning was created based on the 8 Khanate lightning beasts, as long as he cultivated it, he would be more than 10,000 times stronger than the 8 thunder beasts. If he cultivated it to the peak, he would even be able to control the true meaning of lightning in the primordial world. He would be able to control the might of lightning on behalf of the heavens and control all lightning. The person who created the cultivation method of the Son of Lightning was an elder of the Heavenly Thunder sect. It was also because of the creation of the cultivation method of the Son of Lightning that the Heavenly Thunder sect, which could only be considered a third-rate cultivation sect, became one of the 18 peak cultivation sects, standing side by side with the 3 gods sect. And this Spirit Sea and the forest 300 million miles away were designated by the Heavenly Thunder sect as 2 training grounds for cultivation. It was also because of its special encounter that it became famous throughout the primordial world. These 6 streaks of light were 1 successor disciple and 5 inner disciples of the Heavenly Thunder sect. Senior Brother Lei Jun, right now seems to be the time for the Kuei cow to attack. The Kuei cow controls the strongest of the 8 Khanate lightning beasts, the Purple Knight Divine Thunder. If we're not careful, we might die. I will have to trouble Senior Brother to keep an eye on us. As the light descended, a woman said to the dignified and indifferent young man in a purple robe in front of her, "You guys go ahead. I am in charge of this trial, and will naturally protect your lives. However, that is only to ensure the safety of your lives. As for breaking your arms and legs or crippling your cultivation, I do not care. Lei Zhenxing did not move. Unlike the other five, Lei Zhen's body seemed to be surrounded by hazy lightning. It was as if every breath he took resonated with some kind of supreme power in the air, as if he controlled the life and death of an area of 10,000 miles. Senior brother, don't worry. Since we dared to participate in this trial, we already know the danger. As long as senior brother can help us when we are about to die, it will be enough. Another man hurriedly said. Lei Zhen was still cold and said, there is not much time. Don't talk nonsense. You guys go ahead. Yes. The 500 disciples did not dare to delay. They responded and turned into 5 streaks of light, rushing towards the center of the Spirit Sea. After rushing for 30,000 miles, they suddenly split up and rushed into the Spirit Sea below. It is not that easy to become a true disciple. Not only do you have to cultivate the 8 natural thunder beasts, you also have to be able to perfectly use the 8 natural thunder beasts. It took me 572 years to be able to freely enter and exit the Spirit Sea. How long will it take for you guys to pass the trial? Lei Zhen stood on top of the mountain as his eyes flashed with lightning. There was a faint rumbling sound coming from his body. Suddenly, thousands of lightning bolts flashed in the sky. It was as if the space around him was moving according to his thoughts. There was a trace of the law of his words. Of course, it was only a trace. There was still an unknown number of millions and millions of miles between him and Luo Fan, who could truly follow the law with his words. After this thought flashed through his mind, Lei Zhen made a grabbing motion with his hand. Boundless lightning in the world responded and gathered towards him. In the blink of an eye, an incomparably majestic throne with lightning dragons coiled around it condensed below him. Sitting on this throne, Lei Zhen was like the emperor of lightning that could suppress the heavens and the earth. This was the vision of someone who had cultivated the son of thunder. Chapter 489. Lei Zhen sat on his throne. His eyes were half closed, and the lightning dragons around him were extremely tame. They slowly swam on the throne, surrounding and protecting Lei Zhen, causing the oppressive aura of the Emperor of Lightning that Lei Zhen exuded to become even stronger. Just as Lei Zhen was paying attention to the situation in the spiritual sea, the 5 inner disciples who were participating in the test had already entered the Kuei Nyo's territory within the spiritual sea. Kuei Nyo, Crouching Infant, Howling Wu, and Xie Huang were 4 of the 8 natural lightning beasts, but they were 4 different types of beasts after all. As such, it was impossible for them to live in the same spirit sea without any ill feelings between them. Naturally, they had their own territories of influence. This was something that was only natural. If the inner disciples wanted to be promoted to a true disciple, they had to be able to enter and leave the spiritual sea as they pleased. Although the standard was set by Lei Zhen, they had to at least be able to use the 8 natural lightning beasts to the acme of perfection. Only then would they be able to enter and leave the nests of the 4 natural lightning beasts. As a result, even though the Kuei Nyo was in heat and the Kuei Nyo tribe was at its most irritable, they had no choice but to enter. At the very least, these 5 inner disciples had already cultivated to the crossing disaster stage. Moreover, they had already cultivated the 8 great natural lightning beast bodies. If they did not have these prerequisites, even if they were promoted to a successor disciple, they would not have the qualifications to cultivate the method to form the lightning son of heaven. As soon as the 5 inner disciples entered the Kuei Nyo's territory, they turned into either Crouching Infant, Barking Wu, or Chui Huang. One of them even turned into a Lotus of Fate. The 8 natural lightning beasts did not belong to each other, nor did they restrain each other. However, they were beasts of the same level after all, and there was not much difference in strength between them. As a result, it was more appropriate to transform into other natural lightning beasts in order to fight the Kuei Nyo. As for why everyone made different choices, it was because they were more proficient in the natural lightning beasts. These lightning beasts did not live within the Kuei Nyo's territory. As soon as they entered, They naturally attracted the attention of the countless Kuei below. Moo! In an instant, the roars of bulls resounded like thunder from the herd of Kuei bulls. The Kuei ox was a strange beast that was shaped like an ox, but had only one leg. Its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. This Kuei cow was born with the ability to control the divine thunder of purple heaven. With a shake of its body, an endless net of lightning would surge out from the strange lightning markings engraved on its body, capable of shattering any target. Of course, the size and number of the lightning net would naturally depend on the strength and age of the Kuei cow. Although the number of Kueis that the 5 inner disciples had transformed into numbered in the tens of thousands, there were only 5 innate lightning beasts after all. Hence, after the roar, there were only 108 Kueis that charged towards the 5 inner disciples. Each of the 108 Kuei cows was over 30 meters tall, and when they charged over, they were like 108 small mountains. Their red eyes flashed with an indescribable brutality, as if they wanted to tear apart all living beings in their path. Fu Ying, Wei Wu, Xie Huang, and Fate Lotus were all innate lightning beasts of the same level as the Kuei cows. Naturally, the 5 inner disciples who had transformed into these innate lightning beasts did not panic. Before these Kuei bulls could form into an innate formation and gather their thunderwebs together, they each cast out the abilities of their innate thunder beasts. In an instant, 5 different sounds rang out, but all of them contained boundless brutality. They stimulated the innate vitality liquid in the surroundings and produced a loud rumbling sound. Along with the rumbling sound, 5 mystic artifacts formed entirely from lightning appeared out of thin air. They unleashed all kinds of attacks that contained boundless power and charged towards the 108 Kuei cows. Gods? Although the Great Tao was about changing one's body that was originally unsuitable for cultivation into that of an innate god, or perhaps the body of other beasts. However, the Great Tao of cultivation had been perfected by countless intelligent cultivators. Naturally, it was impossible to rely solely on an innate god or a beast's innate ability to fight. Naturally, there would be countless divine abilities and incantations that were based on these innate abilities and special abilities to enrich and strengthen the cultivator's combat strength. These 5 mystic artifacts were formed by the divine lightning wielded by the 4 innate lightning beasts through some mysterious method. They could unleash the power of the divine lightning to its limit, or even surpass that limit. The 108 Kuei cows were now several times stronger than usual under the irritation of the irritation. Facing the attacks from the 5 mystic artifacts, they shook their bodies, and 108 purple heaven thundernets rushed out of their bodies. After they left their bodies, they fused with the other Kuei cows' lightning nets, forming an overwhelming thundercloud that seemed to envelop the entire spiritual sea. With an earth-shattering rumble, it pressed down on the 5 inner disciples. The thundercloud was densely packed with purple heaven thundernets that had condensed into threads. They were extremely powerful. Just one lightning net was enough to turn a mountain that was tens of thousands of feet tall into powder. Now that they had formed a thundercloud, they complemented and supported each other. The power of the thundercloud was tens of thousands of times stronger than a single lightning net. The spiritual sea seemed to be endless seawater, but in fact, it was formed by the innate vitality that was too dense and condensed. However, it was not ordinary seawater. As soon as it was activated by the thundercloud, an endless amount of liquid was converted into innate vitality and surged into the thundercloud. The thundercloud suddenly condensed and shrank by more than 3 times. However, this shrinkage did not cause the power of the thundercloud to decrease. On the contrary, it was precisely because of its shrinkage that the thundercloud's power skyrocketed by more than 10 times. The thundercloud collided with the numerous attacks from the mystic artifacts formed by the 5 types of divine lightning. It was like Mars colliding with Earth, causing an earth-shattering explosion. The boundless innate vitality liquid turned into boundless innate vitality in the explosion and burst out in all directions. At the same time, it was converted into boundless lightning that quickly spread throughout the spiritual sea. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. Although the thundercloud was condensed from the purple heaven divine lightning unleashed by the 108 Kuei cows, the 5 artifacts were only condensed from the divine lightning unleashed by the 5 Intermen disciples. However, in this collision, there was no clear winner. The attacks from the 5 mystic artifacts and the thundercloud actually collapsed at the same time when they collided. In the end, they disappeared without a trace. The profundity of the 5 mystic artifacts could be seen from this. Looks like this Kuei cow isn't that difficult. The power of the 108 Kuei cows combined only has this much power. The inner disciple that had turned into a hidden nascent soul smiled. Don't be too happy. Can't you see that the power of the 108 Kuei cows isn't damaged at all? Furthermore, who knows how many Kuei cows are still eyeing them covetously. If you're too happy now, you'll probably cry later. The inner disciple that had turned into a fate lotus was extremely calm and snorted coldly. Chapter 490. The 108 Kuei cows had all matured. Although they were still incomparable to cultivators who had attained the Tao, the power contained within each Kuei cow was not much different from that of a crossing disaster stage cultivator. In terms of overall strength, there was no suspense at all when so many Kuei cows charged towards the 5 inner disciples. However, the Kuei cows were only a type of Khanate lightning beast after all. Even if their instinctive abilities were unparalleled when compared to real cultivators, they naturally lacked a few changes. And it was these few changes that made the difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, although there were 108 Kuei cows in front of them, the 5 inner disciples were not afraid at all. With just a slight thought, the 5 magic tools condensed from various types of divine lightning shook and flashed mysteriously across the sky. In an instant, the 108 Kuei cows were separated and absorbed into the 5 magic tools. There was a mysterious and subtle connection between the 8 great Khanate lightning beasts. The 5 magic tools were condensed from the divine lightning that the other Khanate lightning beasts innately controlled. With the help of that mysterious and subtle connection, the 5 magic tools easily refined the Kuei cows into the source of lightning energy, increasing the power of the 5 magic tools. Countless Kuei cows below saw this change, and their violent roars became even more violent. In an instant, 1,296 Kuei cows rushed out from below. The current momentum of these Kuei cows was no longer like the 108 Kuei cows from before. Although they seemed to be rather orderly, they were only arranged into a shape that could unleash the power of the lightning net. The 1,296 Kuei cows were directly arranged into a shape in the spiritual sea. Although it was extremely simple, it could draw the endless liquid Khanate chi in the surroundings and convert it into violet heaven divine lightning, greatly strengthening the Kuei cows' innate abilities. Although these Kuei cows were strange beasts without much intelligence, they were born with extremely powerful instincts. They could naturally put up a formation that could greatly strengthen their instincts. However, even so, the Khanate lightning beasts that the 5 inner disciples had transformed into were not moved at all. The fact that the wise elder was able to create the lightning sun of heaven cultivation method with the help of the 8 innate lightning beasts naturally meant that his understanding of the 8 innate lightning beasts had reached a very deep level. This kind of simple formation was naturally no secret to the heavenly Thundermen, but they had thousands of ways to deal with it. The 5 magic tools transformed into 5 different forms in the blink of an eye. As their auras spread, billions of bolts of divine lightning appeared out of thin air, outlining the image of a huge throne in the void. This illusory throne was extremely similar to the one Lei Jun sat on at the edge of the spiritual sea. However, it was extremely illusory, and there were many holes in the middle. It was the throne of the Son of Heaven that could only be formed by the lightning Son of Heaven. The 5 inner disciples used the 4 innate lightning beasts they cultivated. Although there were 5 inner disciples, 2 of them were the same innate lightning beasts, to form the innate lightning beast throne. The reason why there were so many gaps was naturally because the complete Emperor's throne required all 8 types of natural lightning beasts to be condensed. However, there were only 4 types of natural lightning beasts in this place, which only took up half of the necessary amount. To be able to condense the Emperor's throne with so many gaps meant that the 5 inner disciples already had an extremely deep understanding of the Emperor of Lightning's cultivation method. How could they hope for a complete Emperor's throne? Although it was only the Emperor's throne that was full of holes, when the illusory throne appeared, there was still an indescribable pressure coming from it. All the lightning and energy within 1,000 miles seemed to be firmly suppressed by the Emperor's throne and completely controlled. In an instant, the bodies of the 1,296 Kuei ox shuddered. Even the 1,296 lightning webs that had been brewing on the bodies of the lightning beasts to their limits and were about to leave their bodies shuddered violently. Then, all the lightning webs suddenly collapsed. There were even strands of lightning that left the bodies of each Kuei ox and rushed towards the shadow of the throne of the Son of Heaven, condensing. Moo! A furious bull's roar suddenly rang out from somewhere below. Then, a bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt that could destroy a small world suddenly appeared out of thin air and directly pounced towards the illusory throne of the Emperor. In the blink of an eye, it arrived on the illusory throne of the Emperor's throne and collided with it. It's the Kuei Cow King. An inner disciple that had transformed into a hidden nascent soul said with excitement and fear. The bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt was extremely condensed and extremely smooth. It had even formed countless complete cycles within it. It had already reached a state where it could not be broken by external objects. Although this bolt of violet firmament divine lightning was extremely small and weak compared to the lightning net that the Kuei ox had unleashed and a lightning cloud that had condensed into a huge lump, its might was over 10,000 times stronger than the lightning net and the lightning cloud. After all, the Emperor's throne was only an incomplete, illusory image. Although it could suppress the 1,296 Kuei cows, it was still too weak for this bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt. Under the purple heaven thunderbolt, the illusory image of the Emperor's throne of the Emperor suddenly collapsed. In an instant, it shattered into countless types of divine lightning and was directly annihilated by the bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt. In the end, it was devoured by the surrounding spiritual sea without a trace. After the bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt destroyed the illusory image of the Emperor's throne of the Emperor, it was not damaged at all. Without any hesitation, it pounced towards the 5 inner disciples that had condensed the divine lightning. Although it was only a bolt of divine lightning, it was only the size of an ordinary person's arm. Compared to the innate lightning beast that the 5 inner disciples had transformed into, it was incomparably small. However, when the bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt pounced towards them, the 5 inner disciples felt as if their entire bodies were being restrained by an indescribable, invisible force. Even thinking about it required all the strength in their bodies. An aura of death emerged from their minds and quickly filled their entire minds. It made them feel as if their deaths were right in front of them. There was only one Kuei Cow King among the herd of Kuei cows. It was a powerful existence that could only appear among hundreds of thousands or even millions of Kuei cows in the herd. To be able to become a king, a Kuei cow had to at least have the power to suppress the entire herd of Kuei cows. It also had to have perfect control over its innate abilities and abilities. Encountering a king Kuei cow was obviously a little too early for these inner disciples who had yet to become true disciples. What a great king. I didn't expect it to have hidden itself so deeply. At the edge of the spirit sea, Leijon's eyes shone as he observed the changes occurring in the depths of the spirit sea. This thought flashed across his mind. However, it was obvious that he had no intention of making a move. Chapter 491. At this moment, a faint sound of thunder came from the bodies of the 5 inner disciples. Then, the magic tools formed by the godly thunder trembled violently. There was a surge of infinite potential that rushed out and was transmitted into the bodies of the 5 inner disciples through some mysterious channel. With the transmission of this infinite potential, the minds of the 5 inner disciples became clear. The aura of death disappeared without a trace in an instant. At the same time, the infinite godly thunder that had dispersed from the shadow of the Emperor's throne began to gather towards the 5 inner disciples. With a speed that was 100 times faster than the godly thunder of purple cloud, it pounced on the bodies of the 5 inner disciples and wrapped them up in an instant. After the godly thunder wrapped them up, it suddenly shook and carried the 5 inner disciples into 5 streams of light that shot straight up. The spirit sea that was formed by the endless liquid connate origin, chi, seemed to be blackened by the 5 streams of light. It formed a tornado that crazily surged into the 5 streams of light. Through some kind of incomparably complicated process, it turned into a driving force that made the 5 streams of light continuously increase in speed. The godly thunder of purple cloud was released by the Kuei Nyo King in anger. It had reached a perfect and flawless state, so it naturally had countless changes. Although the 5 of them turned into streams of light and flew away, it was impossible for them to dodge the godly thunder of purple cloud so easily. The godly thunder of purple cloud easily turned a mysterious arc in the spirit sea, then changed direction and directly pounced towards the 5 streams of light. The godly thunder of purple cloud even shook slightly during the process, as if it had split into 5 and was thrown towards the 5 streams of light. The godly thunder of purple cloud was mysterious to an unimaginable level. Even though the speed of the 5 streams of light seemed to be much faster than the godly thunder of purple cloud and seemed to be able to easily escape the bombardment of the godly thunder of purple cloud. However, the godly thunder of purple cloud only took a few breaths before it actually caught up to the 5 streams of light and directly bombarded them. The sound was soft, but it was like the sound of something extremely sturdy. It seemed that even the destruction of heaven and earth would not be able to break the sound of something solid shattering instantly came from the 5 streams of light. Then there were 5 soft grunts. Fresh blood suddenly gushed out of the flowing light and disappeared without a trace in the surrounding spirit sea. The 5 streams of light didn't slow down in the slightest because of this change. Instead, they seemed to have suddenly obtained a new source of energy. Their speed increased explosively by several times, and they directly disappeared from the range of the Kuei ox nest. Moo! The angry and unwilling roar of a bull shook the heavens. A king's aura suddenly rose from the herd of Kuei bulls, and it shot into the sky like a pillar that supported the heavens. It even rushed to the top of the spiritual sea. However, this king's aura only appeared for an instant. After a split second, the aura disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Even the roar had completely stopped. The 5 streaks of light shot straight out of the surface of the spirit sea and into the void above. Even though the Kuei Ox King didn't make another move, they didn't show any signs of stopping. From the looks of it, it seemed like he couldn't control himself at all. Within the flowing light, the 5 inner disciples could no longer maintain their natural lightning beast bodies. Their bodies were in a trance, and they formed an extremely strange state. It was as if they were trying their best to maintain their natural lightning beast bodies, but they didn't have enough strength and were about to be beaten back to their original state. Moreover, every one of them had a pained expression on their faces, and the power in their bodies was extremely weak. There was an extremely thin but extremely stubborn, self-sufficient heavenly thunder of purple clouds, which seemed to have a mind of its own, crazily swimming around them, constantly dispersing the power in their bodies, making it impossible for them to gather their own power, making it difficult for them to maintain their innate thunder beast bodies, and making it impossible for them to control their own bodies. They could only follow the power of the escape light and fly upwards, unable to stop. Is this the change that happens when the purple heaven thunderbolt is condensed to the extreme? Compared to the original method, it has a different kind of profoundness. These 5 inner disciples were able to participate in the test to be promoted to a true disciple. So naturally, they had a certain level of cultivation. At this moment, although it seemed extremely dangerous, none of them panicked, and even had such thoughts in their minds. It's just that it's pure. If the original method was cultivated to the peak, its power would be thousands of times stronger than this. Another inner disciple said disdainfully. At this moment, the inner disciple was circulating all the power in his body, and he was gradually controlling the state of his body. Although he still couldn't get rid of the purple heaven thunderbolt, the situation was developing in a good direction. The Kuei Ox King's purple heaven thunderbolt isn't that easy to get rid of. Lei Jun looked over from below, and a playful smile appeared on his face, but he didn't care. In the blink of an eye, the 5 flowing lights had already reached a height of 3,000 miles above the ground. And at this moment, the 5 purple heaven thunderbolts that had entered the bodies of the 5 inner disciples suddenly shook, as if they had broken through some kind of limit. They suddenly shrank inwards and unexpectedly condensed into 5 Kuei oxen within the bodies of the 5 inner disciples. Every single one of the Kuei was extremely thin and small, but they all gave off an extremely intelligent aura. Their eyes shone with the light of wisdom. They were like real living beings. After these 5 Kuei oxen had formed, an infinite amount of lightning suddenly spread out from their bodies. Like fishing, the lightning wrapped around the power of the 5 inner disciples and continuously melted them away. Damn it! At this time, the 5 inner disciples finally changed. When these divine thunderbolts are more than 3,000 miles away from the Kuei Ox King, they will actually break free from the Kuei Ox King's control and naturally form their own consciousness. The inner disciple, who had already somewhat controlled the situation, exclaimed. Following the transformation of the 5 purple heaven thunderbolts, the 5 inner disciples had completely changed. They could no longer maintain any trace of their natural lightning beast bodies, and all of them were beaten back to their original forms, once again revealing their human bodies. At this time, Lei Jun, who was sitting on the emperor's throne, frowned. His eyes flashed with electricity as he looked at the empty space above him. However, he wasn't staring at the 5 inner men disciples. Instead, he was staring at an empty space 50 kilometers above them. Which expert is spying on my men's divine ability? I wonder if you could show yourself? Lei Jun said indifferently. As he did so, the 5 Kuei cows in the bodies of the 5 inner disciples suddenly collapsed, turning into threads of divine lightning that dissipated from the orifices of the 5 inner disciples. They gradually disappeared into the void, as if they had never appeared. I didn't think that in just a few thousand years, such a mysterious technique would appear in the primordial world. A clear male voice rang out from nowhere. Then, a strange light lit up in the empty space that Lei Jun was staring at. After this light appeared, it quickly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to a height of 10 meters, forming a simple door. Behind the door was a man who emitted an indescribable aura. It was as if he was heaven and earth, as if he was the universe, as if he was the boundless empty space. You're actually Lei Jiuxiao. Seeing this man, Lei Jun's expression changed for the first time. Chapter 492. The person who appeared in front of Lei Jun was Luo Fan's 6th disciple, Lei Jiuxiao, who had not appeared for more than 3,000 years. The 5 inner disciples were in deep trouble. Although it was not that they did not have any means to alleviate the situation in their bodies, they had not really thought of it. Suddenly, they heard senior brother Lei Jun say those words. Then, the Kuei ox formed by the purple heaven divine thunder suddenly disappeared. How could they not understand that it was because of an unexpected situation that senior brother Lei Jun had solved the problem in their bodies? At that moment, they did not have time to recover from their injuries. Their bodies shook and they rushed down with a stream of light outside their bodies. They quickly left their original positions and floated in the void hundreds of thousands of feet away from where they were. Only then did they have time to see what exactly had happened. At this moment, senior brother Lei Jun's other words were also transmitted into their ears. Hearing this, the 5 inner disciples' eyes were first shocked. Then they exploded with incomparably strong fanaticism. Luo Fan was a supreme god who suppressed the entire untainted world. No matter how high the innate god was in the eyes of ordinary creatures in the untainted world, they all respected Luo Fan. All of them admired Luo Fan very much. Even if they occasionally mentioned him, they would still sigh in admiration. With such a high status, how many disciples Luo Fan had, and what kind of existences they had long been spread throughout the untainted world. Even creatures who had just gained spiritual consciousness could probably say 1 or 2 things. Under such circumstances, how could the inner disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Men not have heard of the name Lei Jiuxiao? Lei Jiuxiao, the 6th disciple of Tao Master Luo Fan, the person who is said to have the body of Thunder Spirit and seems to have swum in the supreme way of Thunder origin. This thought instantly resurfaced in the minds of the 5 inner disciples. In an instant, they did not even care about their own injuries. They stared fixedly at the figure that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The Heavenly Thunder Man is the god of cultivation. The male faction of the Great Tao relied on the 8 great primordial lightning beasts, and their ultimate cultivation achievement was the body of the Lightning Emperor. Under such circumstances, the source of lightning in the supreme Great Tao was the goal that almost all the male disciples of the Heavenly Thunder sect yearned for, regardless of whether they were outer disciples, inner disciples, successor disciples, or even elders and sect masters. At this moment, an existence that had swum through the supreme quintessence of lightning of the Grand Tao was right in front of them. So how could they bear to let him go? Lei Jiuxiao's appearance did not change much compared to 3,000 years ago, but there was an additional mysterious aura around him. In the eyes of the inner disciples of the Heavenly Thunder sect, this born Taoism aptitude was simply the most perfect body in the world. Every rise and fall of his skin, every line of his body, and the proportion of his limbs made them feel a sense of perfection. Even the smallest detail was so in line with the way of thunder that they had comprehended. It was as if the source of thunder and lightning was directly revealed in front of them. It was as if the body of the Lightning Emperor that the Heavenly Thunder sect eventually cultivated could not compare to this born Taoism aptitude. Looking at Lei Jiuxiao's body, the inner disciples could faintly feel that some mysterious existence was constantly communicating with this person in front of them. This person's breathing seemed so ordinary to ordinary people. But in the eyes of the inner disciples, it was like he was the thunder and lightning that filled the void of the untainted world. It was as if he was the thunder and the thunder and lightning were him. This is the aura of the source of lightning. The 5 inner disciples seemed to have comprehended something. They felt as if they had vaguely comprehended some mysterious truth that they had yearned for, that they had diligently sought but could not obtain. As for what exactly this truth was, it was impossible for them to explain it clearly. Even so, they felt that their 8 great primordial lightning beasts had undergone some kind of inexplicable change. They seemed to have become more complete and complete. Lei Zhen of the Heavenly Thunder sect greets Senior Lei Jiuxiao. At this moment, Lei Zhen had already taken a step forward and arrived in the void. He knelt before Lei Jiuxiao. Seeing Lei Zhen's performance, the other inner disciples came to a sudden realization. They hastily withdrew their fanaticism and hurriedly bowed to Lei Jiuxiao. Lei Jiuxiao could not help but be at a loss when he saw their behavior. Why is this happening? Could it be that the untainted world has undergone such a great change in the past 3,000 years? Although these people's cultivation is lacking, their cultivation methods are quite impressive. Why are they bowing to me as soon as they see me? Such a thought flashed through Lei Jiuxiao's mind. However, Lei Jiuxiao had lived in the small kiliocosm for tens of millions of years. His mental cultivation had already reached an incredible level. Although he had such a thought in his mind, he did not slow down at all. He hurriedly helped everyone up and said, "You're too courteous. I'm only an itinerant celestial cultivator. I don't deserve such courtesy. Senior Jiuxiao, you're wrong. You're the disciple of Tao Master Luo Fan and a fellow disciple of the Three Gods sect's founder. This courtesy is appropriate, Lei Jun hurriedly said. Tao Master? So Master is already called a Tao Master. Then what kind of sect is the Three Gods sect? Lei Jiuxiao's mind jolted when he heard this. However, he naturally could not say this out loud. He immediately laughed and helped everyone up. He said, I've just come out of the Dong Tian. It's been more than 3,000 years since I left the untainted world. I don't know anything about the changes in the untainted world. Since I've met all of you here, it must be fate that brought us together. Why don't all of you follow me into the Thunder Dong Tian? I can also ask all of you about the changes in the untainted world. As you command, Senior. Lei Jun bowed. Among the heavenly thunder disciples, the 5 inner disciples were already in the crossing calamity realm. They were only one step away from passing the heavenly tribulation and becoming an itinerant celestial. Lei Jun had already cultivated the lightning sun of heaven. Although it was only the initial stage, he had already reached the itinerant celestial realm. He was not too far away from the peak. However, all of them felt that they were as insignificant as ants in front of Lei Jiuxiao. Even Lei Jun felt that as long as Lei Jiuxiao willed it, he would only need to crush him with a finger to crush him into dust. That was why they were so obedient to Lei Jiuxiao. As for the fact that Lei Jiuxiao was a disciple of Tao Master Luo Fan and a fellow disciple of the Three Gods sect's founder, that was secondary. Although Lei Jiuxiao's status was noble, what did it have to do with them? They were the heavenly thunder men, not the disciples of the Three Gods sect or Tao Master Luo Fan. Lei Jiuxiao was well aware of this, but he did not point it out. After all, he still needed to understand the changes in the untainted world over the past 3,000 years from these people. Chapter 493. Heavenly Abode Appears. Part 2. Lei Jiuxiao chuckled and made a grabbing motion. The door that he had just come out of appeared once again. However, Lei Jun and the others only felt an incomparably mysterious, invisible force suddenly appear out of nowhere and wrap around them. This caused their bodies to float forward uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, they had already followed Lei Jiuxiao into the door. After everyone entered, the door shook slightly and slowly disappeared without a trace like an illusion. When Lei Jun and the others returned to their senses, they found that their surroundings had already changed. This is the lightning heavenly abode. Lei Jun looked at the surroundings that were similar to the untainted world. Only the faint sound of thunder could be heard from above. His mind was filled with doubt and shock. This was not the untainted world. Lei Jun sensed something the moment he set foot in this world. The surroundings seemed to be the same as the untainted world, but it lacked a boundless and boundless aura. The structure of the boundless qi that filled the void was also extremely different from the boundless qi in the untainted world. Any living being with slightly acute senses would be able to easily master this technique in 100 years. Furthermore, Lei Jun had already cultivated the Lightning Emperor's body. At this moment, Lei Jiuxiao chuckled and said, "The Lightning Heavenly Abode is only the name I have for this place. As for what it should be called, I have not decided yet." As he spoke, there was a loud crack that shook the entire heavenly abode. Almost at the exact same moment, a gargantuan lightning dragon that was tens of millions of feet in length came crashing down from the sky above, with a faint sound of thunder could be heard. This lightning dragon contained boundless vitality and was extremely fast. In an instant, it rushed into the ground of the heavenly abode. Endless violent sounds rang out from underground, and the entire ground began to shake violently. Finally, after a long while, the ground slowly disappeared and the ground regained its calm. However, with his sharp senses, Lei Jun discovered that after the lightning dragon rushed into the ground, the vitality of the entire land seemed to have increased significantly. He even saw spots of green suddenly appear where the lightning dragon had rushed in. The wood elemental spiritual energy gradually spread out, adding a lot of vitality to this part of the world. This is the creation heavenly thunder. I didn't expect such heavenly thunder to exist in nature. The Lightning Emperor's body had an unimaginable sense of all lightning in the world. As soon as Lei Jun sensed this lightning dragon, he knew what kind of lightning it was condensed from. The creation Heavenly Thunder was not one of the 8 great divine thunders controlled by the 8 great divine thunders. However, it was a type of heavenly thunder that was derived from the divine thunders. Its power was only at the 1296 types of heavenly thunder that were derived from the 8 great divine thunders. This was the reason that the lightning dragon rushed into the ground. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, and 1, 1. Above them, there was a seemingly simple immortal cave abode. The cave abode was at the peak of the mountain. It looked like a 3 feet tall, 1-acre stone house. There were no decorations on the inside or outside of the stone house. It looked extremely simple and unadorned. However, it emitted an indescribable majesty. The countless lightning dragons around the mountain were scattered in the void, but they could not get close to the stone house. They only gathered around it, as if they were guarding it. When they stepped onto the edge of the cave abode, Lei Jun and the others were shocked. The essence Qi around the cave abode seemed to have undergone some mysterious changes. It turned into a mysterious essence Qi that was between chaotic essence Qi and connate essence Qi. This mysterious essence Qi was filled with the essence of lightning that was as gentle as water. The benefits of breathing in the cave abode were even more than cultivating in the outside world for a month. Lei Jiuxiao naturally did not mind. He led them into the cave abode. After sitting down, he casually explained the origin of the name Thunder Cave Abode and told them about the changes in the untainted land over the past 3,000 years. When Lei Jun and the others saw such a cave abode, they were even more impressed by Lei Jiuxiao. They immediately told Lei Jiuxiao everything they knew and explained the changes in the untainted land over the past 3,000 years. As Lei Jiuxiao listened to these changes, he was inexplicably amazed. If he entered the virtual world, he could easily find out about these things. However, it was troublesome after all. Now that someone was explaining, it was even easier. Lei Jiuxiao sighed. It's only been 3,000 years, yet the primordial world has changed so much. It's nothing more than the vicissitudes. Back then, after being summoned by Luo Fan into the void Wuji palace that had already merged with the untainted land, Lei Jiuxiao's aptitude was comparable to other connate gods' senior brothers and sisters. However, because his mind surpassed almost all connate gods, his comprehension was only slightly worse than Hongjuan's. He was even several times better than Luo, Fu, and the others. Although the 296 billion square meters of small worlds that appeared in the untainted land after the great tribulation of heaven and earth were different from the untainted land, they were still worlds after all. The evolution process, naturally, could not be calculated according to the number of days. If one wanted to roughly see something clearly, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. Therefore, the few of them and Luo Fan stayed in the strange palace for more than 2,000 years. During those 2,000 years, the few of them made great progress. Needless to say, Hongjun did not reach the peak of the Golden Immortal Realm, but he completed the progress that would have taken tens of thousands of years of hard cultivation. Luo, Fu, and Guang Pu directly raised their cultivation realms to the peak of the perfected Immortal Realm. They were only one step away from the Golden Immortal Realm. In addition to the two of them, Luo Chunyang directly raised his cultivation realm to the peak of the individual Immortal Realm. He was also one step away from the perfected Immortal Realm. Gu Ling was slightly worse than the others. He just barely stepped into the peak of the individual Immortal Realm. He was much further away from the perfected Immortal Realm than Luo Chunyang. After all, he was originally only in the Crossing Disaster Realm. It was already difficult for him to make such a huge leap. Lei Jiuxiao originally just stepped into the individual Immortal Realm. However, after 2,000 years of comprehension, he fought to a very strange realm. He had already surpassed the individual Immortal Realm, but still lacked a little opportunity to reach the perfected Immortal Realm. It could be said that he was half a step away from the perfected immortal realm. The harvest of those 2,000 years was simply unimaginable. It made them wish that they could never leave. They wanted to stay in the strange palace forever to comprehend the mysterious aura emitted by the one. 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, 2,000 years was the limit that the few of them could endure. Even Hongjun, who had the highest cultivation realm, felt dizzy after comprehending the aura for 2,000 years. He felt that his whole mind, his whole divine soul, and his whole sea of consciousness were filled with some kind of strange information. He felt that it was extremely difficult to operate it. How could he continue to comprehend the extremely mysterious aura? At that time, Luo Fan said to them, "Your opportunity has come to an end. Each of you can choose a cave to cultivate in." As he spoke, he sent them out of the strange palace. Meanwhile, he continued to comprehend the indestructible aura that was emitted by the one. 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. He wanted to comprehend all kinds of mysterious secrets from it to improve his cultivation realm. However, he did not care about Hongjun and the others anymore. Although Hongjun and the others were very unwilling, they knew that what Luo Fan said was the truth. Even if they stayed in the palace, they would only be wasting time. Therefore, after a discussion, they could only reluctantly choose one of the one. 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. They turned around and entered the place that was most suitable for them to cultivate. The 2,000 years of comprehension allowed them to obtain all kinds of understanding and improve their cultivation realm. At the same time, it also allowed them to have a deep understanding of the nature of the one. 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. Although the shocking number of heaven and earth were complete heaven and earth, they were attached to the primordial world and were rooted in the void of the primordial world. They were a great supplement to the primordial world. They breathed in all kinds of vitality and a mysterious and indescribable aura. However, they could not form independently. Seriously speaking, they were similar to the minor Kiliacosm and medium Kiliacosm in the Void Wuji Palace that Luo Fan had opened up. Therefore, they could be called Grotto Heavens. In addition, when Luo Fan asked them to leave, he called these Heaven and Earth Grotto Heavens, so they were naturally Grotto Heavens. The place that Lei Jiuxiao chose was the small heaven and earth that he, Lei Jun, and the others were currently in. This small world was generally similar to the primordial world. At that time, the primordial chi that filled the void carried the aura of the source of lightning that only existed in the supreme Great Tao. This aura was extremely beneficial to Lei Jiuxiao, who had a lightning spirit body. The half-step perfected immortal realm was a rather awkward realm. Lei Jiuxiao had cultivated in this grotto heaven for 1,000 years. Naturally, he wanted to take the remaining half-step and truly reach the perfected immortal realm. However, although he was only half a step away, it was not something that could be crossed in the short 1,000 years. Over the 1,000 years, apart from improving his various techniques to the extent that they were compatible with his cultivation realm, Lei Jiuxiao's improvement was rather limited.